Happy birthday, America.
Happy birthday. Happy 250th birthday, America.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Totally Tanked, the tankiest podcast in Tankville. I'm Rob.
And I am John, and this is episode 84, recording and streaming live on the 4th of July.
4th of July,
2026.
Independence Day.
And with the failure of the Trump junta to organise a decent birthday party for America's 250th birthday party, it falls to two Australians sitting in a basement in Canberra with a big pile of beer to give it a red hot crack. Whee! And we do have genuine Budweiser in the beer tube. And yeah, that was quite a mission on a day where the real feel was 4 degrees to get that on the bicycle. But we got there. Okay, so... you'd think that for the 250th, America could have got, Metallica, Lady Gaga, Bruce Springsteen, Taylor Swift, Billy Joel, the Mountain Goat.
Taylor's a little bit busy today.
Yeah, I know, but she's kind of having the party that America should have had. For a Live Aid style extravaganza, but instead Washington is getting a sad old man rambling for 90 minutes, and Kash Patel's girlfriend will get to do whatever it is she does. We're less sad,
yay,
somewhat less old, and have plenty of beer, so it's going to be great. And also we're covering the Sherman, which is one of our all-time favourite tanks.
Yep.
So it's also the day the Australia team lost against the Egyptian Pharaohs, and some people might have been up since 4 a.m. watching the World Cup. Or were we still up at 4 a.m.? I did love Batista Advocate had a story, local moron thinks he can go all the way through. And there's some rugby tonight as the Wallabies take on Ireland, a team we haven't beaten in a very long time. Quickly for some housekeeping, you can get our Totally Tanked merchandise. That's the t-shirts, hats, mugs, miniskirts, etc. from redbubble.com. Just make sure to look for Totally Tanked. And if you like the show, please do hit the like button, subscribe, leave relevant reviews and drop comments. So just drop down anything down there and help us out. It's all engagement. And we just want to remind people that as the open internet is increasingly being destroyed by speculative finance, signing up to our mailing list on totallytanked.net is the very best way to stay in touch with the show. We can get vaporized at any moment, but anything we rebuild is probably going to be based off the mailing list. And finally, before we get into the tanks, and Rob explains the difference between an M4 A176W and an M4 A3E2 Jumbo, let's just talk about the beer. We've got a beer tube full of Budweiser. Like the M4, it's not as bad as people say. In fact, it's just a decent mass-produced lager of the type that most people in the world drink most of the time. Then we've got the formal review beer that Rob has brought, and it might be American or it might be something else for a strange and confusing reason that Rob will try and explain. And finally, Brandon from the Brandon Makes Stuff YouTube channel has sent in a big pile of American beer.
Good on him.
And a bottle of barbecue sauce and some gold Pokemon cards, which we will also try and drink and pass on some judgments.
Pokemon cards will go to my child.
Yeah, the judgments on the beer, we're not going to try and drink those. And finally, fortunately, covering this tank is going to take a lot of time, so we'll see how our bladders hold up. And a big thanks to everyone in the Totally Tanked community who contributed to this episode. Hugh has sent in some great footage of M4s tearing up the track at Bovington where he was there for Tankfest. Those are a Jumbo and the M4A2 E8 Fury. We will talk about why it may or may not actually be an E8 because E stands for experimental, but that model became the M4A2. Anyway, not the M4A2. Anyway,
it's the Easy 8.
Yeah. Well, that's experimental, Rob. Anyway,
doesn't matter.
Someone else suggested we put American beer in the beer tube, and a patron suggested we do a profile on William Sherman for the halftime break. So 20 minutes of me talking about William Sherman. Look forward to that, folks. And Brandon, of course, sent the beer. Workers in China have provided the lovely cowboy hats. It truly takes a village.
I'm a cowboy. Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Takes a village to make a beer soak podcast about tanks. And on that note, I'm taking this very uncomfortable, glittery
Why is that uncomfortable?
hat off. Oh, you can leave yours on.
I might. And,
okay, so...
All right.
Okay, Rob, you are going to talk for a bit.
Yes, well, a little bit. Look, last time we looked at the M4 Sherman was back in episode 7 in January of 2020. Oh, what sweet summer childs we were in the time before COVID and land wars in Europe. The country was still on fire for us, but we're getting past that.
Yeah, I mean, environmental apocalypse was bearing down on us, but now it's great to see the rest of the world's caught up to us in temperatures, and we're like, we've already solar powered our aircon, we're fine for another 5 degrees of warming.
We really didn't do this marvellous tank justice back then, and we're not going to try and cover all of it today either, as it's too big a beast. So instead, on the 4th of July, Independence Day, we're going to concentrate on the American aspects of the Sherman gun tanks and leave most of the Soviet and Commonwealth and non-gun tank uses of the Sherman for another time.
I mean, we could do a whole episode on the Sherman crab, really.
I can do it. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. It's just, I said to myself, well, it's this is going to go on. This podcast is going to go for a long time, and it's probably covering maybe a third or a quarter.
Now, I just quickly want to recognise the folks we've got on the line for the live stream. So David's with us. Fantastic. He says, bring on the bud. Yeah, man. Alan's joined us talking about how great the Sherman is. He is mostly correct. He's being rude about your beer choices, Rob. Tasman's with us from Sydney. Antonio's from Vancouver. Okay, Buddy's joining us from France. Good, nice one.
Awesome.
Airsoft Adventures redacted their message. Woz is here saying America. America, fuck you. Anyway, Raghaus joined us. Cool. Captivate them. That's Alexander, I believe. Jade, yes, one of our new patrons from Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a fun town. I really enjoyed my time there. Okay, I think we've covered most of the people. Okay, Buddy's noting that Fury's called an E8 because of the HVSS suspension. Yes, but it's that the designation E8 was experimental, and then they standardised that, and we shouldn't be calling it E8 after it's been entered production. But it's fine. Everyone calls it an Easy 8. They know what it is. I'm not a prescriptivist. Yes.
Really? You're not going to say that, John. Anyway, the name, the M4 Medium. That's it. Normally, tank names and designations progress in linear fashion, as in Panzer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And
Challenger 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
And that usually means higher numbers come after the previous iteration. And then we have fun calling out the silly naming conventions of the Cromwell and the Valentine marks as they go back and forth.
I guess the other thing is normally you would expect the higher designation to be better. Although in some cases with German stuff, the later designations were built cheaper.
And then there's some of the letters come before the other letters, and then there's sometimes capital letters and lowercase letters and all that sort of fun stuff. As I said, it's all fun. And we've made fun of the American overuse of the M number, as in the M1, M2, M3, M4, and how it can be applied to everything. All their bits of kit from, which is why their tanks keep getting named by the Brits. And whilst the Sherman is named by the Brits, it was named by Winston Churchill. It still has some confusing naming conventions in that the M4, the M4A1, M4A2, M4A3, M4A4, M4A5, M4A6 were all being built concurrently and coming out of different factories with basic similar designs, but a number of notable differences in the engine, petrol versus diesel, Continental radial, Ford V8, GM twin G41s, Chrysler multi-bank diesel, welded hulls versus cast hulls, hatches, big hatches, little hatches, no hatches, hulls, suspension, tracks, and later different guns.
And just because it came out of the factory as one designation doesn't mean it finished the war with that set of kit either, because there was huge field modification and improvement and downgrading. And so from a modeler's point of view, just make what you want. There's definitely someone out there somewhere. So just in general terms, though, an M4A1 has a cast hull, the others are welded. And as an aside, the cast hulls actually turned out to be much weaker than the welded hulls for reasons that I'm not entirely sure about. W in brackets means it had wet-stowed ammunition. 76 means it had a 76mm gun. M4A2 means it has a diesel engine.
One of the diesel engines.
Yeah, but the M4A2 was a series that had diesel engines. And the HVSS is a later suspension system that allowed for wider tracks and became the Easy 8. But there were non-Easy 8s that had HVSS, and that stands for Horizontal Volute Suspension System. By the war's end, any conceivable variant could still have been in service or even in production. To the soldiers of the day, an M4 was largely an M4 or just a tank, and it's only later generations of rivet counters that have started keeping track of which way the springs face. An easy point of ID is the 76mm gun has a muzzle brake, unless it's a Sherman Firefly, in case it's a much longer gun with a muzzle brake.
And some of the first 76s didn't have muzzle brakes because they didn't actually have the muzzle brakes constructed at that time. So they had little caps on the end of the barrel so that the threading...
The weight was right? Yeah.
No, so the threading wouldn't get damaged when the round went down.
Anyway, but it still stands that most...
it's got at least 3 rivets.
most 76s have a muzzle brake. And the cast hulls of the M4A1s look like they were made in the 19th century. They're really quite a different looking tank. All right, Rob.
All righty. So, stats. Now, we're going to suffix all these numbers with the words depending upon variant. So, produced from February 1942 to July 1945. Built approximately 50,000. Mass, 32 tonnes plus or minus, depending on variant. Length, around 20 feet 7 inches, width out to 9 feet 10 inches, height up to 9 feet 9 inches. Again, all depending on variant. Crew: commander, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver or / bow gunner, so crew of 5. Armour anywhere from half an inch which is on the top and the bottoms, to 7 inches on the jumbo tank with its...
Not all around,
no,
mind you.
just only the front of the turret. So basically, most of it was, most of the front-facing armour on the tank was 2 inches, and with a bit more through from the mantlet. The main gun, you had the 75mm gun, which was the M3. It would carry 90 to 104 rounds inside the tank.
The M3 gun that had been on the M3 tank. But
yes.
Yes.
Which was also a 3-inch gun, but it's not a 3-inch gun because the 3-inch gun was a different 3-inch gun.
Just quickly want to say hi to Armoured Austerity, who has a great YouTube channel folks should check out when they're not watching us. And Epic Ezra has joined us from Seattle. G'day, folks.
All right, then there was the 76mm gun, which they carried 71 rounds inside the tank, or the 105mm howitzer, of which they carried 66 rounds. Secondary armaments, they had started out with the 50 cal Browning Mardeuse machine gun mounted on a pintle at the rear of the turret, so you had to be standing outside the tank to be able to fire it.
Often those mounts got modified a lot in the field as well. Yeah, 600 rounds is a lot of 50 cal ammo though, Rob.
No, it depends how many planes you're splatting it away at, or buildings want to smash apart. All right, then it had 2 to 4 30 cal Brownings. First, well, it had the one for the bow gunner and one of the coax, but then the earlier tanks had twin... Double-decker twin forward-facing hull-mounted 30 cals, which they very quickly realised these are just a waste of time and got rid of them. I mean, even the bow gunners 30 cal was a bit of a waste of time because they couldn't see where the shots were falling, and so
it was more the driver aiming it while the guy held the trigger down.
Yeah. Well, it was a spraying and praying, but the bow gunner really ended up handing out ammunition to the loader to make sure the coax 30 cal didn't run out of rounds.
Sorry, I think we missed Crafty Potato in our shout-outs. They're in the chat too, from Warsaw, I believe, or Poland anyway. The best tank army in the world.
All right, and carry your 6,000 to 6,500 rounds for the 30 cal, depending on variant. Transmission, you had the Spicer manual synchromesh transmission with 5 forward and 1 reverse gears.
I got to say, when I was first learning how to drive, people thought synchromesh was a bit of a luxury.
Oh, total luxury. I mean, real young men didn't need that sort of rubbish.
So, and admittedly, that was in the late 1980s, but I just found it funny.
You didn't get your license.
I started getting my dad was making me driving around car parks then, and yes. Anyway, that car did have synchromesh, but he was like, "Oh, you're very lucky to have synchromesh," and seeing these things had synchromesh back in World War II.
All right, suspension. You started off with the vertical volute spring suspension, and then you moved on to the horizontal volute spring suspension. And I'll tell you what volute means later on, boys and girls.
It's a funny sort of spring.
Yeah, I'm just going to tease you with that one. Fuel capacity, 138 to 175 US gallons, which provided an operational range of on-road around 150 miles, or cross-country 60 to 100 miles, again, depending on variant. Maximum speed, 22 to 30 miles on road, or 15 to 20 miles per hour off-road, depending on variant.
Which is not blistering fast, but it's just good enough to get around.
Oh, that's the thing. It's better than walking and faster than all the British infantry tanks. So
it did mean that for convoy escorts, that was one of the things that the Hellcat with it, I think had something like double the speed, was really good at because it could keep up with the trucks. But yeah,
yes, and do almost 100 k's.
I just want to note we have got a poll running, Rob, before we go too far, and it is that the Sherman tanks. The options are heck yeah or could have done better. And currently 12 votes are all heck yeah. So 4th of July, heck yeah.
Heck yeah. Come on, America.
America.
All right. Now, let's talk about all those variants. And as I said, they were built concurrently and not consecutively, and a vehicle could evolve over the course of their life. Built across 10 main plants in the US, plus 1 in Montreal. And let's go in name order rather than production order, as that just gets messy, as you will soon see.
It's messy any which way. It's just messy.
I wonder how many more goals Messi scored today. I think he got at least one this morning. Anyway, the M4, it had a welded hull and a cast turret, the Continental radial engine with 350 horsepower and a top speed of 24 miles per hour. And there were 8,389 built from July 42 to January 44. So remember, July 42, which is the M4. It started out with the extra twin fixed forward firing 30 cals in the hull, but they were soon removed. It got most of the upgrades, but not the larger turret.
So it's not just you had the twin 30 cals and then you had another 30 cal in the hull. This is this hangover from early war thinking it wasn't just the Americans, that machine guns were actually the decisive weapon of tanks.
The M2 medium, which was the precursor to
was just a machine gun nest.
Yeah. 7 to 9 machine guns.
Something like that. Yeah. And then quickly people realized that high explosive was much more effective than machine guns, and so the emphasis moved in the design. But right at the start of the Sherman, it did actually have a lot more machine guns than it really needed.
All right, then we go on to the M4A1, which actually came before the M4 and was also the last type of Sherman built, having gotten all the upgrades throughout its production run. It had a cast hull and a cast turret. The Continental radial engine with 350 horsepower and a top speed of 24 miles per hour. There were 9,707 built from February 42 to July 45, so it was the last one built and the first one off the production line. Then we go into the M4A2. Again, this came before the M4 with 10,968 built from April of 42 to May 44. It had a welded hull and the General Motors twin inline G41 diesel engine with 375 horsepower and a top speed of 30 miles per hour. These were rarely used by the US Army except for training, with almost all being sent to the Brits and the Soviets. Those 75 were sent to the Marines in the Pacific. The US Army wanted everything in Europe to run on petrol, and did not want a diesel engine tank to duplicate their fuel logistics. The Soviets predominantly used diesel, so the M4A2 worked for them. And the Brits already had a mix of fuel, with the Valentines being diesel and the other tanks being petrol, so it made little difference. And the early thought for the US Marines was that they would be supplied by the Navy, who would be supplying the diesel, but later changed to our next tank, which was the M4A3. This was the mainstay of the US Army, with 12,596 built from June 42 till June 45. It had a welded hull, but most significantly the Ford V8 petrol engine with 450 horsepower. And a top speed of 26 miles an hour. The Ford V8 took a little longer to get right in the factory, but once it was fine-tuned, it was the preferred engine for the Sherman. This tank would get all the upgrades first.
So I just want to note here that the annoying thing from the American perspective is that if they had been able to design around the Ford engine, which was very compact and flat, the tank could have been much shorter, in vertical height, which means it could have been better armoured for the same weight and presented a smaller target. But Ford couldn't iron the kinks out in time. So it's real. You could make a counterfactual that something probably with a silhouette more like a Cromwell was possible, but Ford just couldn't. They spent 2 years dicking around with the correct engine.
All right. Now, the M4A4 was, I'm guessing, a joke the US played on the Brits, who got nearly all of them. It had a welded hull and was powered by the Chrysler multi-bank air-cooled petrol engine.
So just want to interrupt you for a second, Rob. Meddy's made a really fun point here. So welcome back to the chat, Meddy. Good to see you again. His grandmother worked where the Sherman turret was pressed and formed in Grafton, Massachusetts. And he was saying he's seen pictures, he's seen the press and it was enormous, which is... interesting.
There you go. All right, so we're talking about the Chrysler multi-bank air-cooled petrol engine, which had 30 pistons, 5 inline 6-cylinder engines put together.
Now, Rob had initially had that in as V6s.
Because obviously it's just...
which is funny, because Rob and I have both owned Ford Falcons, which had a inline 6. Yeah.
Which, anyway, I'm just so used to Vs nowadays. Anyway, so just to show that the twin double-decker bus engines are easy to do, and why not put 5 engines into a tank? It had to have a longer hull to fit the monster engine with 370 horsepower.
That must have been a hell of a moment where they made the case to do a different hull, because the standardization was such a part of what made this go. But somehow they convinced them to fit it in. And I mean, 370 horsepower is good, but...
As a diesel, and a top speed of 25 miles an hour. 7,687 built from July 43 to November 43, so only had a couple of months. It was the first Sherman to halt production and the most common hull to be converted into a Firefly by the Poms. Then you get the...
Sorry, for the American audience, POMs is what we call English people. Cause
Just like we call... Yeah, just like we
you don't
call
want to hear what we
Yanks.
call you, but yeah.
We call you Yanks.
Yanks is the nice version.
Septics. Anyway, the M4A5, which was the French-Canadian cousin of the M4A1, which was called the Grizzly, built in Montreal from August 43 after the production line of the Ram tank, which was the M3 hull, and the Valentine turret was converted over to the M4. But they made some changes to the M4A1, which is why it gets its own name, even though there were only 188 built. Besides the Commonwealth Type 19 radio and shifting of the engineering tools, the main difference was the Canadian dry pin on the tracks, which were fitted after they left the factory. They were cheaper and simpler tracks that did not require rubber, of which there was a shortage.
I suspect they were extremely squeaky and clanky, though.
Well, of course, everybody wants a squeaky, clanky tank. Yeah. Anyway, then we had the M4A6. It had a composite hull with a sharp-nosed cast front, with a longer hull of welded steel middle and rear, and the Caterpillar 9-cylinder air-cooled radial diesel engine with 450 horsepower and a top speed of 30 miles per hour. But
so 450 horsepower is a significant bump from the other ones, but I mean, a radial air-cooled diesel is an interesting, terrifying idea. Worth remembering that the Soviets from 1938 were cranking out aluminium block diesels throwing off 500 horsepower, so the mighty engineering of Detroit for engines was still a ways behind the Soviets.
Yeah. All right. Only 75 of the A6s were built from October 43 to February 44, as the decision was made to only use petrol engines. Those that were built were only used for training at Fort Knox. Then, what all these original M4 medians had in common that made them useful and successful was they were all under 40 tonnes, so a standard 40-tonne crane could lift them in and out of transport ships. They all had lifting hooks, so they could be lifted. The 75mm gun did not extend beyond the hull, so they could all be packed into the smallest space possible inside a ship. Because remember, ship hulls don't really worry so much about height, it's just the volume of area on the floor.
Yeah, but the gun not overhanging was
what I'm
just a
saying
huge
is that
transport advantage.
a taller tank did not affect them so much for shipping.
Yeah, it fitted. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So it fitted inside the smallest space possible inside a ship. And are we seeing a theme here, boys and girls? They could fit onto rail cars without modification. And beside the engine, all the parts from the hatches, turrets, tracks, wheels, bolts, and internal gubbins were all interchangeable between the different builds. It was mainly the engine and the cast versus welded hull that differentiated them. In 1942, the 75mm gun was the most effective tank gun in a rotating turret the Western Allies had. Just remember that. This was the first tank that had a 75mm gun in a rotating turret in 1942. The war had already been going on for 3 years by the time they rolled out it in El Alamein.
And let's not dwell too long on how long the T-34 had been in service with its 76mm gun at that point. Yeah. I mean, the M3 medium obviously had the 75mm gun, but it was in a sponson mount, which was suboptimal, much less than ideal.
Limiting. Yeah. Right. It was capable of infantry support with HE, and it also had anti-armor rounds, and so it could quite happily take on German tanks and Italian tanks, and which is what it did a lot of in North Africa. So these were all the original M4 mediums, produced in different factories and coming out at the same time. But over time, they evolved and changed and improved, but those improvements were only applied to some of the factories, or they could be installed in the field. So let's go over some of those improvements and why they were needed. The early Shermans had a front hull angled at 56 degrees that increased the virtual thickness of the armour, but didn't leave any space for the driver and his offsider.
Which is a bit of an oversight.
Yeah, so they had these armoured areas that bulged forwards out of the hull that made nice flat spots for a round to go through, and it did not help that the hull hatches were quite small because the roof of the hull was the space there was limited because of the steep angle of the armour, and so you could only have small hatches. And as you look at the video going around, you will see me standing in one of those very small hatches. And it would not be easy to quickly get out of those hatches. And yes, I'm comparing myself to someone who would have been wearing a lot more kit and winter clothing rather than shorts and totally tank t-shirt from redbubble.com that I was wearing. So I think it's very unlikely I would have fit if I wore winter clothing through that hatch.
Apparently, the heated crew suits, which was a major benefit of this tank over every other tank in the world, because they could just plug. They had PowerPoints at all their crew positions, but they needed someone's help if they wanted to take a wee. The heated crew suit was quite
There I am.
enveloping. Sorry, Rob's pointing at the screen for folks listening on audio, which is the majority. We'll have the slideshow on Totally Tanked on.
There you go. Anyway, armour patches were welded onto the hull bulges to provide a bit of slope and extra armour, but it was the redesigned hull that eventually made a difference. The overall slope of the hull was decreased to 47 degrees, which removed the bulges of the driver and co-driver's positions, and also provided more room in the roof of the hull for larger hatches, so they could get in and out. When you look at the early Shermans, you also can count 5 crew, but only 3 hatches, 2 in the hull and only 1 in the turret. The commander and the gunner on the right side of the turret can easily get out of the commander's hatch, but the poor old loader was stuck on the other side of the turret behind the gun and the recoil guard, making it difficult to exit. Numerous crews removed the recoil guard so that the loader could exit more easily, and they just had to be careful when firing the gun. The reason for the single hatch was that, this is what they've stated, was that they only wanted the commander to be able to look around, as it's his job and not the loader's. That seems like a very weak argument to me. Anyway.
Well, you can see that when you're designing it from first principles, you can say, let's eliminate all the hatches, but fundamentally, in lots of situations, you actually want people looking around in lots of directions who aren't just the
there we go again. Having to stand sideways in the front of that Firefly. Anyway, so you've got, and an extra hatch was also a weak point in the roof. It took them a year for them to stop telling the loader to suck it up and actually start building turrets with a loader's hatch in 1943.
Having said all these criticisms of the hatches, the Sherman was, because of its roominess, which is partly a result of the height imposed by the radial engine design, and the crankshaft having to run through the middle of the tank. But it was a much roomier tank than equivalent tanks with, something like the Matilda or the Valentine were unbelievably cramped. So they could make improvements for crew egress in the event of a fire, but it was still actually much better than a lot of the other alternatives at the time.
Okay. They also installed or retrofitted the T-23 all-round vision commander's cupola to provide better and safer observation. So the T-23 turret, which comes along later, also had the T-23 cupola, commander's cupola, which could be applied to the earlier tank turrets as well.
Now, I just want to say, Mehdi and Alan, you're kicking on a bit there in the comments. Just be nice to each other, or we're going to have to start hitting moderation tools. Yeah, we don't want to do that.
No, because that will take away from our drinking beer, and nobody wants that.
Yeah.
All right. Whilst the 75mm gun was very good for 1942 and most of 1943, by the time of the D-Day invasion, the inability to penetrate heavily armoured Nazi tanks, which included the more up-armoured Panzer IVs, was becoming a liability. And the US had been looking since 1942 for a way to get a high-velocity anti-tank gun into battle, and were trialling tanks to replace the Sherman. But whilst they had the gun, they could not find a suitable tank substitute and did not want to disrupt tank production. What they did achieve was the new T-23 turret that could mount the high-velocity 76mm gun and could be mounted on an existing Sherman, because the turret rings were the same width at 69 inches. But the gun by itself could not be mounted in the older turrets. The normal armor-piercing ammo of the 76mm gun could penetrate the Tiger from the front at ranges under 500 yards, but not the sloped front armor of the Panther. Even with the high-velocity armor-piercing rounds, it couldn't penetrate the sloped armor of the Panther from over 300 yards, which was available from September 44. As in the HVAP ammo. The 76mm gun tanks were available from February of 44, but in order to not duplicate logistics, they were left out of the D-Day invasion and not supplied until the US breakout of Normandy from the beachhead as part of Operation Cobra in July 44. Right. The 75mm gun had a good HE round for a 75mm gun and worked well targeting troops and machine gun nests, but did not have enough explosive to threaten concrete bunkers.
I would just throw in there, Rob, that its ability to mess up anti-tank guns was the thing the crews really loved, because it was anti-tank guns they were worried about more so than enemy tanks. just because there were a lot more of them, and they were heavily camouflaged, and they got surprised by them. And in particular the ambushes that the Germans loved to use against armor, and particularly in North Africa. Having a really good high explosive ramp meant you could deal with an embedded anti-tank gun in ways that more high velocity guns didn't do as good a job with.
Yeah, the issue was when they started going on more of the offensive against the Germans in Italy and other places where they had time to build serious defences. Then the 75mm gun with its HE round couldn't really go through those bunkers. All right, and the M7 pre-self-propelled gun with its 105mm howitzer was too vulnerable to be used in close support, so a Sherman assault tank with a 105mm gun was developed. They were mounted in the standard Sherman turret on the M4 and the M4A3 hulls. They only carried 66 rounds and came to service in February of 44, but wasn't deployed to Europe until September of 44. They built 3,800 of them were converted, and each tank battalion would have 6 Sherman 105s allocated them for close fire support to take out bunkers and laying down smoke screens. They were not designed for tank combat, but did carry 6 to 8 heat rounds for emergencies.
Just want to note, Airsoft Adventures asking, did the Hellcat and M10 share the same gun with the 76 Sherman? I believe it was a 90mm gun that was in those.
No, they were 76s. The M10 had the 3-inch gun,
yeah, right,
which is different from the 75 and the 76. The Hellcat had the 76.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's remembering off the top of my head, and I could be totally wrong. So feel free to correct me, folks.
There's plenty of people to correct us on the stream here. So
I think that's what it was. I'm pretty sure the M10 had a different 3-inch gun.
Okay.
Right. So the issues for the Sherman was its reputation for brewing up easily. Was due to the petrol engine and the ammo being stored in the hull sponsons, usually right behind the big white star aiming mark. So when you look at the tanks and you see the great big white star on the side of the tank, you say, right behind that is where they store the ammo. So if I'm an anti-tank gunner and I aim for that great big white star, which is nice and easy to see.
They go boom!
They go boom. So especially...
It was a bit like the T-72 turret popping in Ukraine kind of deal. Yeah.
And especially when it's the front armour is very sloped, so providing extra thickness, whereas the side armour is very flat and provides no extra protection. So it was an accepted maxim for most of my life that the Sherman caught fire far too easily. They also tried welding.
I strongly suspect that was survivor bias, because the crews didn't die when their tanks got hit the way that they just died in other tanks. But yeah.
They also tried welding armor patches on the side of the hull where the ammo was stored, but an extra inch of steel did little on such a flat surface.
You see a lot of them in the photos we've got in the slideshow. And again, if you're listening, totallytank.net, we've got them there, or anywhere else you look at tanks. But crews at the time noted that it really drew German gunners' attentions to being something worth aiming at. In that, they've up armored that, so something behind that is really cool. And that in other vehicles and other times, you try and draw the gunners to the less vulnerable parts of the vehicles. And I'm thinking like the fake vision slits that they put on.
Yeah, they draw on the front too.
Yeah. So it's a... people have said, in the comments, that the height of the M4 was its only real drawback. I would say that the ammunition storage and the side sponsons until later in the war, when they sorted out with wet stowage, that was a design failure that was overcome by the other significant benefits of the vehicle. But it's not a good idea to stow ammunition in side sponsons.
No. These days, knowledgeable folks have looked more at the actual stats and found that the Sherman caught fire no more than any other Allied tank in 1943. The Brits in North Africa would load up their brand new Shermans with 140 plus rounds when they were usually only supposed to carry 96. So they stored them any which way, and the unstowed rounds would cook off at any sort of penetrating hit. When the ammo wet stowage bins were introduced in 1944, the chance of the Sherman brewing up decreased dramatically from about 60 to 80% down to about 10 to 15%. Thoughts are that it was less about the wet stowage, but rather the ammo being stored in armoured bins under the bottom of the hull rather than on the sides. It was also the first Allied tank with lots of HE rounds in it, especially compared to the 2-pounder anti-tank rounds the bombs carried. So
which they refused to put high explosive in, despite it being possible.
Point being is that you got these great big rounds, and there's got a lot of HE stored inside the hull, and whereas previously you had these tiny little rounds with not a lot of HE in them. So
just want to say hi to Steve Grimes, who's joined us from Arizona.
hey, welcome, Steve. All right, the narrowness. Then we get on to the narrowness of the initial tracks, which were only 16.5 inches wide. Led to many flotation issues for the Sherman.
Or lack of flotation.
Which is where the weight is concentrated in a small area, so the tank could easily get bogged in mud, sand and snow, which it faced all of. But it also had a lack of grip on icy roads, even with the steel tracks, which meant many a Sherman slid off a road and into a ditch. Whilst the rubber tracks, so you could have either steel tracks or you could have rubber padded tracks. The rubber padded tracks quickly wore out on stony surfaces, such as those found in Italy. Various solutions were tried to deal with the situation. Now that's where we start really getting into some weeds. So the different types of extended grousers.
Just want to touch on a couple of comments here. Alan's complaining that he sent me photos 2.5 years ago of Sherman's from an Air Force base in Idaho. My apologies, Alan. It had slipped my mind. It's not that you're not special. It's just that it was 2.5 years ago. And we've already got quite a big slideshow running at the moment anyway. Armored Austerity's saying that the whole aim for the weak spots thing's a fallacy of video games. I hear what you're saying there, but we have records from Sherman tank operators of the period that they felt that the applique armor was drawing attention to the weakness.
The great big white star on the outside of it.
The white star as an aiming point's obviously a legitimate thing, but there are many certainly I've seen written accounts of British operators saying that they thought that they didn't want the applique armor on those spots because they thought it was just drawing attention to the weakness.
Well, you would be able to see the applique from a distance, and
this is before the internet, of course, because these days once you find a weakness, everyone knows in a day.
Yeah.
But
you should aim for the commander's cupola of vision slip. That's how you do, or 1,500 points of damage to a tank in World of Tanks.
There's that, yeah.
All right, different types of extended grousers were added to the outside of the tracks, but they all had different problems. First off, we'll start off with the extended end connectors, or the EECs, or duckbills, they are also called, added several inches of width. That's what he said. Tish.
This is going to be a running gag from Rob through the rest of this episode, so I hope you enjoyed that one.
And provided better ground pressure for the tank.
It still landed better than any joke Elon Musk's ever tried to make. So,
and they provided better ground pressure for the tank, but were not good enough for deep mud and snow. The universal platypus grousers, which were much longer extenders, they were used by the Commonwealth.
Platypus is an endangered species. Don't go putting them on tank tracks.
Well, was that a better joke? Yeah, possibly. Anyway, they were longer extenders that were welded or bolted onto the tracks and were very effective in the mud and snow. But if they broke, they could easily pull the entire track off with them because they were bolted and welded onto the track. They also needed maintenance every 30 miles. And after a company of tanks with the attached platypus extenders drove down a paved road, the road would be so chewed up by the grousers that it would be unsuitable for wheeled vehicles afterwards.
Which is a lot of digging up when you think we're talking about four-wheel drives.
Yes, they would just rip up roads.
Or six-wheel drive American Bedford trucks. But All
right. The solution to this problem was a change to the suspension system. The initial vertical volute spring suspension (VVSS) mounted on the Sherman was bolted onto the hull and meant that the track could not be wider on the inside of the sprocket. It was also struggling with the increases of weight to the Sherman with the new turret and the 76mm gun.
It was basically a 3-ton weight increase for the newer models, and this solved it all.
The solution was the horizontal volute spring suspension (HVSS), which moved the running gear further away from the hull so that the track could be wider on the inside as well as the outside. The HVSS allowed the Sherman to mount wider 23-inch tracks, providing a smoother ride and made maintenance easier as the wheels could be replaced without unbolting the entire bogie assembly. It was developed in mid-44 and deployed in Europe in December 44.
There's also a double road wheel configuration, which again is spreading load.
After which it became the standard suspension system for the Sherman. And for those who don't know, i.e. me, volute means the spring is a spiral roll rather than a narrow coil spring, and so is much more robust. So basically, think of a piece of paper, you wind it up into a column, and then you pull out one end of it, and like you were going to stab somebody with it, and then that's your spring. And so it's all it's the whole length of it.
Yeah, so it's not a round piece of metal; it's a rectangular piece of metal in a spiral. Now, I just want to say, wider tracks, they always seem like a good idea for us amateur tank enthusiasts. It's like, oh, why wouldn't you have wider tracks? You'll just float over the snow and the mud.
Like the T-34 was, it's 19.5-inch tracks.
That's it.
Sorry, 50 centimetres because they use metrics.
Indeed. Lower ground pressure, definitely makes for a more mobile tank, but tracks do weigh a lot more, so there's always a trade-off.
And I forgot to mention in there with the all the extenders they were mucking around with, each one would take to apply it would take about a day's worth of work to put those extenders
incredible amount of work
on the tracks.
Every single track link needing something either bolted on or welded on.
Some of the ones they bolted on quite easily, but sometimes they wouldn't put them.
It's still a lot of bolting.
But they wouldn't put them on every track link. They might put it on every 3 type thing, so they get some benefit from it without having to have too many on there because they break off anyway. And what variants of the gun tanks did these improvements get us? Okay. What variants did these improvements get us? I hear you ask. So then we talk about John was talking about the EZ8, the M4A376W HVSS, which is, as we know, is the EZ8. It was considered the ultimate production upgrade of the Sherman. The Ford V8 provided good mobility, reliability, and maintainability. The HVSS provided the smooth ride and the ability to navigate difficult terrain. The wet under-turret ammo stowage meant it was unlikely to catch fire, and the 76mm gun could take out nearly all German tanks at close range, under 300 yards, sorry.
Particularly if they had the secret squirrel ammunition, which wasn't always available, but
as I was saying before, the HVAP even for the
high velocity armor piercing.
Yeah, but for the Panthers from the front, it's still. I mean, any of them from the sides, it could do, but the Panthers from the front, even the HVAP didn't always work. And it can even take the Tiger out from 900 yards from the front. All the sides. The single-piece welded rounded front hull. Sorry, the single-piece welded rounded front hull removed the weak points of the multi-piece welded and cast hull, and the T-23 turret armor was increased by 3.5 inches gun mantlet, increasing protection. It also included the wider hatches for the driver, co-driver to get out of, and a hatch for the loader. So all the benefits were put into the EZ8. And it became the standard tank for after the war. Basically, all the US Shermans were turned into EZ8s.
We said it back when we did the first episode on the Sherman that yes, we know EZ8 isn't the official designation, but it's just the language everyone uses. That would be my choice of World War II tank to serve in.
That's what I'm wearing here.
Yeah, you were the most likely to survive in that tank than any other. And yes, there's a lot of other factors that went into that: the air superiority, the parts, the training, many just being on the winning side. But it was in World War II a very good tank. Now, yes, an IS-2, if it caught it, would moose it, but that's a whole other
Canadian
thing.
saying. I don't know. I was moosing something there.
You've absolutely moosed it.
Why not? All right. Okay. Then we have the M4A3E2, aka the Jumbo. So not so much
I prefer to pronounce it the Jumbo.
Not so much an improvement, but a new variant to be used as an assault tank in place of a heavy tank that the US did not have. They tried building a heavy tank and kept on giving up because it didn't really work. But at 42 tons of up-armored welded hull, it came with 7 inches of steel in the turret. That's what he said. The Ford V8 engine was able to move it around, but not as quick as the regular Shermans. They only built 250 and all. They built 254, and 4 of those they kept at home, but the other 250 were very quickly deployed to Europe from August of 44. They were found to be very effective. The added armor provided, they tested them out and found they could pretty much withstand any sort of shell from the from the Nazis up to the Tiger II 88, the big 88s.
I did find it interesting in terms of tank design compared to what the paths that something like, World of Tanks or War Thunder offers you with upgrading things. That they didn't say, let's have a bigger engine and go faster, and they didn't say, let's have a bigger gun and do more damage. They just said, okay, let's just put a ton more armor on this and accept that it's going to go a lot slower. And as that's obviously, it's a niche role that's the trade-off you want to make, but in that niche, it was very useful.
As I said, they were using only like the 105s and later on the flamethrower tanks, was a case of they were used for specific tasks. Usually they send them in first, so as an assault tank, so any sort of anti-tank rounds would bounce off the front of their armour. But this is where we get to all 250 started with the 75mm gun.
So I just want to say, for those on the video feed, the video of us riding the Sherman Firefly into the...
driven by our mate Graham.
Driven by our mate Graham, and us in the Sherman Firefly at the end of Oz Armour Fest last year is fantastic. But it was taken by Jerry, who we had just literally met on the day, and we'd invested a bit of time in Jerry just in a friendly way. And this is the things you do at a tank festival, and this is where you go and buy your tickets and do your rides, and completely unexpectedly, because he had our email address because we'd sent the pictures of him riding a tank around, and anyway, it's just a beautiful bit of footage that he sent through totally unasked for, and it was great. And thank you, Jerry, if you're listening. And
maybe we'll see him again. Yeah. Who knows? Anyway, all 250 jumbos started out with the 75mm gun for infantry support, and it was strange that as an assault tank they didn't fit the 105mm assault gun, as the 75 was no good against concrete bunkers, and the 76 could at least chip away at it. And they had the
they had both.
They had 105s, and the 105s could fit in the turrets they were using.
I suspect it was that they were saying we've already overloaded this chassis and we don't want to put more weight on it. I suspect. I don't have any evidence for that, but it's just a supposition. But, yeah.
By 1945, 100 of the jumbos had been fitted with the 76mm gun in the field in order to take on the heavier Nazi armour more effectively. So they can, when they were leading the charge, they could also take out any tanks they ran into. All right. A couple of notes on the Sherman that jumped out at me. The Model T Ford meant that the US had a large population of men who knew how to drive a car and the mechanical requirements that came with operating a car back then.
And also they made a point of making the Sherman much more like driving a car than other countries did, because other countries, like, we're going to have to train someone to drive this thing from scratch. No one knows how to drive anything.
They can drive a horse and cart, but they can't drive a car.
Whereas for the American tank designers, they said we've got maybe millions of people who know how to drive a car, and so we're going to make it like driving a car. And different approach, very good one for what they were facing there.
So they had a much higher population than the rest of the world, and this gave the US a large manpower advantage. The simplicity of operating the Sherman leaned into the base knowledge of driving. All right, very few Shermans were captured in working order and used by the Nazis, whereas lots of other countries had their tanks captured and used. Only around 20 were captured, I'm going to guess for the following reasons. Once they were hit, they brewed up, the crew usually escaping, as crew mortality rate was actually pretty low. And the Allies being on the offensive meant the Germans, whilst they could defeat the Shermans, were not usually in a position to recover them afterwards. So that's why they only had 20. As we've said before, the white star painted on the sides of the tank made for excellent aiming point for the enemy gunners. Tank crews started painting over them in green or black unofficially, but this was never authorised.
So many photos of it, though.
What was authorised was that the painting of a white or yellow circle around the star to make an even better aiming point, so that it was not mistaken for a German cross at long range. There you go. The gun stabilizer worked very well for those crews who were taught how to operate it, but secrecy meant that most crews did not get the training, and a tool that was able to keep the gun on target when the tank came to a quick stop and fire more accurately was not used. It could be used to fire on the move, but crews found it better to use it at the gun stabilizer at a quick stop.
So for the crews lucky enough to have been able to get the classified stabilizer documentation and to have been in a unit that bothered with training with it, the stabilizer did offer real advantages in getting in getting the gun on target.
I think somebody's drunk.
After the so the point was it could get the gun on target after they came to a stop. Firing on the move was something that really didn't become a thing until much better controllers in the 1970s. But the point was that it really helped them firing the first shot because the gun was pointing roughly in the general direction thanks to the stabilizer. Now, the problem being that very few Sherman crews ever got trained how to use the stabilizer properly, and so they just said, this is a piece of junk and we don't know what to do with it.
No, it's just taking up weight and space.
Yeah.
Right. Early 75mm rounds, the M72 was not well liked as it did not have good armour penetration, and troops would often use captured German 75mm ammo in US casings as preference. That was until the M61 shell came along in the spring of 1943.
That suggests quite a cottage industry of taking German ammo and putting it into the US
casings. If you're hanging around the desert of North Africa, what else?
Yeah, I'm just saying there's a cottage industry going on there.
All right. They also found that the radios were very good with commanders and the regular radios not interfering with each other, which is what happened with the British radios, the Type 19s, and and they had a range of about to 7 to 10 miles. So the British Type 19s had a longer range when it's set up properly, but they could go when they were VHF radios, so they go out for longer range. But most of the time they were set up in just high frequency, which only had about a 2-mile range of local comms, whereas the American radios had a set range of 7 to 10 miles, and it worked all the time for anybody around. So that pretty much covered all the tanks around you and your commander behind you, and possibly the next level commander behind that.
So, OK Booties just asked, did we see the Challenger 3 debuted at Tankfest? We saw that, and our correspondent Hugh turned up the day after the Challenger 3 had gone around, which we will speak to Hugh about it.
That's right. Speakings will continue until morale improves. Right.
We've still got a little bit of beer left in the tube there, Rob. If you want to top yours up, I'll just... You get a little bit. We're planning the next beer. We're also planning a wee break, but
we're gonna keep on going. We got conflicts.
Got way more to get through.
Yeah, it's all in the Sherman. All right.
We're empty on the beer tube is done. There we go.
Operators. There's a huge list of operators, but only looking at the USA, with a brief mention of the Commonwealth and Soviets, and the fun story of how the Chinese got a Marine M4A2 for their use in the Civil War, and how it ended up on a Victory Day parade. The same Victory Day parade as the Gongchen tank, but a different parade.
Different town.
Different town.
Yeah.
So the Soviets gave the communists...
Sorry, city. Anytime you hear Chinese talking about towns and villages, a village is like 1 million people and a town is like 10 million people. It's... I'm exaggerating somewhat, but the scale is different to anything our audience has ever understood.
Australia, with our 28 million people, we just have no concept.
I did once get asked to teach a class at in a Chinese village and talk about coming from Australia. And I drew a map of Australia and I drew a map of China, and I said, this is roughly the scale and they're roughly the same size. And they went, ooh. And I said, and the population of Australia is less than one of your cities. Yeah. And they're like, whoa.
Just remember, most of Australia is desert, all right, boys and girls? It's got a lot of...
we do have some quite big cities, but not very many of them.
No. Right. So the Soviets gave the Communist Chinese around 800 Shermans, but this is the story of one of the 75 US Marine M4A2s that you can see in the slideshow. The Marine 1st Tank Battalion had fought in Okinawa in 45 and lost most of the tanks, and had not yet been resupplied when the war ended, as they were resting up for the invasion of Japan in 46. So when the war ended, they were tasked to go to China to repatriate the millions of Japanese in China back to Japan. The Marines went to the supply depot in Guam to get issued with brand new M4A3 105 tanks. But the loggies in charge said, I don't have any tanks for you guys. Too bad, so sad, go away.
The funny thing was, the guy who said that was lying and did get court-martialed for his lies.
It's just such a loggy thing, saying, if I give you this tank, then I won't have a tank to give somebody else. All right? It was later found that there were 60 M4A3 105s.
All right, Rob, this is a very important beer, so you need to knock that one off and have your half.
But it was too late, and the Marines got sent to China in October 45 with their old battle-weary M4A2s. All right.
So History of Everything's chimed in. I'm going to read his comment. It really is just the tank. In every sense, it is the generic tank that I feel everyone near 30 overthinks about when we hear tank. According to my audience, that is now the Abrams. Yeah, it's just the America. It's mostly because it's the American way of viewing things, that there is just a tank, currently it's the Abrams, and back then it was the Sherman. But yeah.
All right. I have a beer.
Okay, so what we have here, sorry, we're going to keep interrupting the show because we've got to talk about Brandon's beer shipment. This is, it's called a...
Because we like beer and people sending us beer, we don't want to call that out.
It's called a Freem, so it's Pfriem. This is their Pilsner. Now, when I posted on social media a picture of the beer hall that Brandon had sent us, this is the one that people got very excited about that we had it. So, okay, it's a Pilsner. Here we go. That is an earthy, hoppy Pilsner. Oh, God.
It's got a lot of flavours to it.
It's very bitter, but it's very well balanced. It is delicious. Yeah, next time that America chooses to let me know if I can enter the country before I have to commit to the expense.
Hood River, Oregon.
Yeah. Oh, I love Oregon. Well, I love Oregon beers. I spent a bit of time in Oregon and the microbreweries back in the late 90s were super. Yeah, this is really good. Okay, Rob, continue talking about the Chinese M4A2.
All right, so they've been sent to China with their battle-weary M4A2s. They were in China during an active civil war. Just remember that, boys and girls, trying to get the Japanese out. And they were there until January of 1947, so another 2 years. When the Marines left, they handed over their camp to the Kuomintang, but with no spares or ability to repair the tanks left behind. Eventually, the Kuomintang camp was overrun by the communists in January of 49, and they were able to get this single Sherman running, but without any rounds for the main gun. So they removed the main gun and instead installed some type of heavy machine gun in its place.
That is some Mad Max sort of retrofitting. That's hilarious.
There you go. So Hull 012403 fought through the rest of the war and was on the Victory Day Parade on the 1st of October 1949 outside of Beijing, and is now on display in the Beijing Tank Museum.
I think that is a tank museum we need to visit.
29 maybe. See what happens there.
Yeah.
All right. So now we'll get back to normal broadcasting of what other operators there were. So the Brits during the war got 17,000 Shermans.
Now, Tank Archives did a really interesting post recently about how a lot of the Shermans that were shipped to Britain, the Americans thought were going to go to Russia, but the British just said, "Oh, we're going to keep these," and sent shitty British tanks to the Russians.
Hang on. Like what, the Matildas, or because the Valentines were coming from Canada?
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, all sorts of British tanks that ended up in Russian service were mostly because they kept the Shermans for themselves. And let's face it. I'm sorry, British people listening, but the flag shagging. We're going to talk about some of the revisionism going on right now about the Cromwell. But fundamentally, the best British units as their main tank wanted Shermans. They did not want Cromwells. It wasn't until Comet arrived that they said, this is a good tank. Comet was a good tank, absolutely. And then, of course, Centurion was exemplary. But, it was Shermans that they wanted for serious fighting.
I think the Centurion became exemplary. I don't think it was actually exemplary. Didn't actually achieve anything.
Well, only 6 of them got to the continent and none of them saw combat.
And they had their mono wheels.
Yeah, but Centurion, Alan's already noted in the comments, Centurion's range was atrocious. Absolutely it was. But, I will still die on the hill that Centurion was the best single tank that's ever been made. But that wasn't till the war was over. And in terms of in the war, Sherman was what the British wanted. They didn't want any of their tanks. They wanted Shermans. Yeah.
So anyway, the Brits got 17,000 Shermans, which were then handed out to other Commonwealth and Free forces. They also converted 2,200 of them into the Sherman Firefly with their 17-pounders.
We could do probably 2,200. That's a whole episode for us.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, anyway, they also wanted their bomb thrower, and they didn't like the stabilizer as they were not as well trained in gunnery on the Sherman as the Yanks, because basically they didn't fire as many rounds down range to learn how the gun worked before going to battle.
Now, I want to note on the stabilizer issue again. Given how hard it was for the American crews to get stabilizer manuals because of security reasons, I am going to make a wild-ass guess based on no evidence at all that the British didn't see too many of those manuals.
The Yanks actually sent teams over there to train them, and they still didn't like it.
Yeah, anyway, it is a documented by much smarter people than us thing that the over secrecy surrounding the stabilizer was a huge problem for its use.
Anyway, so the 17-pounder worked for the Brits as they were already making 17-pounder ammo, which the US had none of, so there was no point providing Fireflies to the US, even though the US did order 100 Fireflies to be delivered in 1945, but they were never provided. I'm sure the Brits just kept the money though. All right, the Soviets also got 4,100 Shermans, and the Marines got 1,100. All right, conflicts. Again, we're only looking at the US use of gun tanks in World War II, but we'll briefly delve into how they performed in Korea.
All right, Rob, next beer.
All right.
Sorry, I keep demanding Rob give me beer because they're on his side of the table. But so we have, now this one, we've had it before, but it has got more excitement out of the audience than any of them. It is one of the greatest American beers. It's not quite Pliny the Elder, but...
Shaking it up a bit there,
oh, no, I'm shaking it up. It's the Founders KBS Imperial Stout aged in bourbon barrels. So get ready for our stout appreciation thoughts.
All right. So we're going to North Africa. The first 300 Shermans saw battle in November of 42 at the Second Battle of El Alamein, where they kicked butt, but they were operated by the Commonwealth, so we won't go into them. So instead, we'll go into Kasserine Pass, which in February 43, where the US Second Corps and Major General Orlando Ward's 1st Armoured Division and the elements of their 1st and 34th Infantry Divisions and their Shermans met up with one Erwin Rommel. And whilst it was a tactical mauling, the US did actually hold the pass and Rommel was forced to withdraw.
It's one of the greatest arguments in modern war nerdery, it being like, oh, was Kasserine Pass actually a debacle or not? And it's like, it was a debacle, but they, you know, the weight of numbers, it wasn't as bad a debacle as it's come to be thought of as. But anyway.
All right. Mm-hmm. We have had this before.
We have had it before, yeah. And
did I get it or somebody else get it?
Well, no, Brandon sent it before.
There you go.
Yeah, but it is one of the world's best beers, the KBS Founders.
It's got a skull on it.
Stout.
I hope it's not a...
it's very strong.
I hope it's not a SS skull. Mm-hmm. Are we the baddies? Oh, I love those chocolatey smells.
Yeah. This is, I mean, stout is the benchmark Guinness, and this is so much better. It's like drinking a hot chocolate that's alcoholic and fizzy.
There is, at my local shops, which has a great selection of really weird beers. There is one big bottle of like last time, like a 750 or an 800 900 ml bottle of chocolate stout for about $95. And I keep looking at it thinking...
That's too much to pay for...
I know, but I keep looking at it thinking, we could do that one. That'd be pretty special.
That's whiskey prices.
I mean, it's basically 2 cases of
beer. And let me say, do not ever bring a bottle of whiskey to this podcast. We have enough trouble afterwards.
All right. At Kasserine Pass, the US tanks lacked desert camo and went into painted olive drab, or possibly they just put some mud on the tanks. Anyway, so they really stood out against the terrain. The Sherman itself actually worked pretty well, especially against the Panzer IIIs and IVs. Unfortunately, it was employed poorly by inexperienced troops who did not maintain a connection with the forces around them, and commanders who did not carry out appropriate recon and did not know about the German tactics of drawing enemy tanks into the waiting teeth of their anti-tank guns that the Brits had learnt the hard way. It was after...
To be fair, the Brits had learnt it over and over and over again by constantly, because British doctrine demanded that they pursue retreating forces, and the Germans was like, well, this is their doctrine. Every single time they're going to come into the teeth of our anti-tank guns, which is why you cannot have overly restrictive doctrine, and you've got to let commanders actually exercise some judgment. But, for the British, they were facing court-martial and possible death sentences if they didn't follow the doctrine. it was nasty as hell. And, I mean, Patton did the same stuff with this. You got to, maintain contact. And he's not wrong. Maintaining contact's really important. But when you're chasing someone into an obvious ambush, you're just going to get obliterated.
Now, anyway, it was after these encounters that the Panzer IVs would be up armoured to 80 mils on the front armour and mandated to have the Sherman side skirts installed. Basically, Hitler was saying, is looking at the increased ability of these new 75mm Western Allied guns and saying, hang on a sec, we need to do something about this. I mean, they're also starting to get on the back foot on the Eastern Front as well, so needing to do something. All right, Italy. I read a story, or heard a story, I can't remember where it was I got it from, but anyway, about a German 88 gun commander set up along covering a road in Italy. The US would send a Sherman up the narrow road, and get taken out by the 88. Then they'd send up another Sherman, and the same thing would happen. In the end, the gun commander ran out of rounds, but the Americans hadn't run out of tanks.
But yeah, we ran out of ammunition, and they didn't run out of tanks. Is the signature saying about Shermans in World War II in general. Yeah.
All right. The mountainous and rocky terrain of Italy limited the Sherman's tactical and strategic mobility, which is one of the reasons the Allies went into Italy. Those limitations also hampered the Nazis from getting many forces down the boot to oppose the landings from Sicily.
But you did have, Churchill said, "Oh, it's the soft underbelly of Europe." It was not soft. It was not an underbelly.
But, I mean, strategic movement was difficult into Italy. So,
yeah.
But once the Nazis were able to withdraw and set up strong defensive lines across the peninsula, the terrain forced the Shermans into being used as mobile artillery. Now, this is my speculation. I sometimes wonder how the Italy campaign would have gone with Patton in charge rather than Clark, as they were both vainglorious as each other, but at least Patton would have done the staff work to only lose lives on winning, unlike Clark, who seemed to lose lives because he couldn't be bothered doing the simple stuff like preparatory bombardments, reviewing conditions before sacrificing an infantry division to a bad river crossing, or following orders to destroy the enemy rather than driving to Rome to say, "I captured Rome." And then again, the terrain would not have favoured Patton's preference for manoeuvre warfare, and it's been pondered by smarter people than me, and there are probably other US generals who would have done a better job than both of them.
I do think, Rob, you make a good point, though, that for all of Patton's enormous failings, and I've done a whole video on this channel about what a piece of shit Patton was as a human being. One thing he was really great at was fostering fantastic staff work. And to that extent, it's hard to...
Doing the simple stuff really matters.
Oh, right?
Well, making sure that you've got the ammunition, you've got the fuel, you've got the recon of the roads. I can get this many tanks down this road. He would have done that.
Yeah, but it was more. It was a human management thing, and him realizing that the humans he was managing were the staff in his corps headquarters.
That's what I'm
saying. So Patton was extremely good at that for all of his enormous other failings as a human being. So I think Patton would have done better because his staff work was better.
Just remember, boys and girls, the word computer comes from the artillery people who would compute the ranges and elevations for artillery to be able to hit the enemy. So that's where you get computers from, right? Yeah. So his computers would have been better.
Yeah, his computers were better.
Right. So in regards to the Sherman, Patton declared, "In mechanical endurance and ease of maintenance, our tanks are infinitely superior to any other." There you go. So, Normandy.
I think this might be the moment we go for our first feedback, Rob.
Oh, we're pretty close.
Okay, all right.
We're pretty close.
You keep going. All right. I'm queued up. I'm ready to drop the hammer on this thing.
I think we'll be all right. All right. The 75mm gun tank Shermans came ashore on D-Day as Sherman dual drive DDs, deep wading Shermans and others were unloaded straight onto the shore. The DDs at Omaha Beach were a spectacular failure. Being deployed too far out in too big seas and beam onto the swell.
Now, there was also a navigation error there that forced them to turn into the swell to try and correct it. And with the benefit of hindsight, they would have been better just trying to find a beach and then figuring out what they were meant to do. But when we talk about these things, it was huge canvas screens with inflatable struts holding them up. And I saw one of them at the D-Day Museum in Portsmouth. And they still, with this huge canvas screen, had like 3 inches of freeboard from the waves. And
they were designed to have about 1 or 2 feet of freeboard rather than the 6 feet of
swell,
that was coming over.
Yeah. It was a horrendous misjudgment. Thankfully, they could be operated without people actually being in the tanks. So the crews, a lot of them died, but not all of them died. But it was a horrendous cock up. Yeah.
All right, the other 4 beaches, so Omaha did badly, but the other 4 beaches either said the sea is too rough, let's just drop them off on the beach with the deep wading Shermans, or deploy them closer to the shore. So the landings at Utah, Juneau, Gold, and Sword beaches all got their tanks. All right, then once they got into the bocage hedgerows of France, they developed the Rhino Cullen hedgerow cutters mounted on the front of the tank to enable them to cut through the bocage and get off the sunken roads, which was restricting their mobility and providing plenty of ambush positions for the Germans.
When people talk about bocage, there's a modern misunderstanding in that these hedgerows were, we're talking 6 foot of big stones and tree roots. It was a significant obstacle that had to be overcome every time.
Been growing there for the last 300, 400 years.
1,000 years, yeah. But it was the thing that, when people started cultivating fields, they piled all the rocks up at the edges, and that gave them a fence, and then trees grew over the top of it, so it's roots and rocks, and it needed pretty good equipment to break through them.
All right. Normandy was also the first time they faced a lot of Panther tanks, which proved a problem for the 75mm Shermans from the front, plus a couple of Tigers, not nearly as many as people depict. I
think it's like 3 or 4 Tigers.
There were more, but there was a case of there weren't a lot. Whilst the proliferating Pack 40 equivalent or 75mm German guns, Pack 40 doesn't. I mean, that was the gun, but once it was mounted in a Stug, it became a Stug 40 or something stupid like that. They were mounted in the Panzer IVs, Stugs, Jagdpanzers, and Marders, and their towed anti-tank guns, and they were very capable of penetrating the Sherman from the front at least 1,000 yards, especially from ambush on the defence. Now, in the area, there were around 12 to 1,500 Panzers in the Normandy section during the first 2 weeks of D-Day that were rushed to the beachhead, whilst they managed to get down about 2,000 Shermans plus another 1,500, 2,000 other tanks were available for the breakout in July. So basically, they landed about 2,000 Shermans plus another 1,500 to 2,000 British tanks and Stuarts in the area over those couple of week periods after D-Day. The breakout in July was Operation Cobra and beyond. They were also able to backfill all the losses of the tanks that were destroyed. So that's the main thing, is they were able to keep on providing those numbers. So
it was a huge industrial machine. It was like, we lost a few tanks today. There's more coming. They're landing on the beaches. They're coming over. Well, sorry, they're landing at the Mulberries, and then when they captured some ports, they're coming through those. It's a bit like in the Pacific War. It's like, we lost an aircraft carrier today. Well, we got 3 more splashing down in the Bremerton. Yeah.
All right. Once the Allies broke out of the Normandy beachhead in Operation Cobra, the French countryside opened up, and General Bradley and Patton were able to use the Sherman for manoeuvre warfare, and supported by close air support to disrupt any build-up of German armour, such as the Battle of Arcourt in September of 1944, when the Nazis tried to assemble an armoured force to counterattack whilst the weather was bad for flying. Inexperienced German panzer crews advanced through the fog and were flanked by US tank destroyers and Shermans, who were able to stop the advance very quickly while inflicting heavy losses.
All right, I think I'm going to say you're going to go to the halftime break now. So, folks, this is me talking for 20 minutes about why William Sherman is one of the best generals of history. And hope you enjoy it. I know a lot of people are going to hate it because they're racist scum. But the rest of you, it's going to be great. Here we go.
Enjoy.
Thanks to our patrons for pointing out that if we're going to do an episode on the Sherman tank, we should do a profile video on General William Tecumseh Sherman himself. As a student of military history, I am a huge fan of Sherman. He brought together a clarity of military and moral purpose to burn a swathe through the miserable empires of slavery. He ripped the guts out of the Confederacy and decided the issue for his time, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And before the miserable bootlickers start firing up in the comments about states' rights and wars of northern aggression, go and read the Confederate Articles of Secession, you pathetic bastards. The Declaration of Causes of the seceding states contains the words slave or slavery over 80 times. And property gets another mention 16 times, which in this context means people. People held in bondage, tortured and raped at will, bought and sold and brutally worked into early graves, and all for the profit of disgusting people. Now that we understand each other, let's delve into the man's history. William Tecumseh Sherman was born February 8, 1820 to a prominent Ohio family. His father was a judge in the state Supreme Court, and a distant cousin had been one of the founding fathers. His brother Charles became a federal judge, and another brother John was one of the founders of the Republican Party. And let's remember what the Republican Party was when it was founded in 1854. They were dedicated to workers' rights and freeing slaves. Karl Marx was a huge fan of them. They tore up the American political establishment and would lead the nation into a civil war to set people free. The co-option of this once revolutionary force for good in the world into the party of billionaire interests has been one of the great tragedies of human history. Anyway, Sherman's dad died when Sherman was 9 and managed to leave no money behind, but did leave his widow with 11 children to support. This led the young Sherman being fostered by the Ewing family. He would eventually marry one of the Ewing daughters, so insert your step-sibling smut fantasy here. Truly a man ahead of his time. There's some debate among historians as to whether he was christened Tecumseh Sherman, named after the great Shawnee chief Tecumseh, and when exactly the William was added to the front of his name. For what it's worth, he signed all his correspondence, including to his wife, W.T. Sherman. His foster father secured his place at West Point, where he was bright and popular, but racked up heroic numbers of demerits and was never selected for any office. Stationed in the South as a young officer and with his family relations, he moved in the upper circles of society. He was moved on to California, where he happened to be there to draft the documents confirming the discovery of gold that kicked off the gold rush. In 1849, a shop he owned in Coloma, California, earned him $1,500 compared to his salary of $70 a month as an officer. Being in California meant he missed out on the Mexican War and the promotion opportunities that came with it. Sherman's marriage in 1850 to his stepsister Ellen Ewing was attended by the President and Vice President of the United States to give some idea of his social standing, albeit standing without much money. In 1853, he resigned his commission and was set up running a bank in San Francisco by his family, which he would describe as being much more stressful than commanding 100,000 men in battle. In the great bank collapses of 1855, Sherman did manage to keep his bank solvent, which was better than many others in his position achieved. The Panic of 1857, however, took them down. His brothers-in-law tried to set him up in a law practice in Kansas, but with no legal training, he didn't have much success as a lawyer. 1859 saw him appointed the first superintendent of the Louisiana Military Academy, a role in which he appears to have done well. In 1860, when news arrived that South Carolina had seceded, Sherman made his famous prophecy, telling his friends, "You people of the South don't know what you are doing. This country will be drenched in blood, and God only knows how it will end. It is all folly, madness, a crime against civilization. You people speak lightly of war. You don't know what you're talking about. War is a terrible thing. You mistake, too, the people of the North. They are a peaceable people, but an earnest people. And they will fight, too. They are not going to let this country be destroyed without a mighty effort to save it. Besides, where are your men and appliances of war to contend against them? The North can make a steam engine, locomotive, or railway car. Hardly a yard of cloth or pair of shoes can you make. You are rushing into war with one of the most powerful, ingeniously mechanical, and determined people on earth, right at your doors. You are bound to fail. Only in your spirit and determination are you prepared for war. In all else, you are totally unprepared, with a bad cause to start with. At first, you will make headway, but as your limited resources begin to fail, shut out from the markets of Europe, as you will be, your cause will begin to wane. If your people will but stop and think, they must see that in the end that you surely will fail. Which was a clearer view of the coming conflict than most of the leaders of either the North or the South. In January 1861, he was ordered to take receipt of the US arsenal seized at Baton Rouge by the state militia. He instead resigned, saying, "On no earthly account will I do any act or think any thought hostile to or in defiance of the old government of the United States." He then moved to St. Louis to run a cable car company. His family connections were setting him up to be Assistant Secretary of War, but he chose to seek a commission in the regular army, actually in the volunteer army. On June 3, 1861, he wrote to his brother-in-law, "I still think it is to be a long war, very long, much longer than any politician thinks." Sherman might have been an average businessman, but he was going on the record with some very accurate predictions. As a colonel of infantry at the Battle of Bull Run, he was one of very few Union officers to emerge with much credit. Promotion to brigadier followed, and a posting to Kentucky. Sherman viewed his appointment as a betrayal of promises Lincoln had made to him that he wouldn't end up in such a senior position. This is a very, very unusual sort of complaint for a general to make. With Confederate forces running riot in Kentucky and thrust into a command he hadn't wanted, Sherman had some sort of depressive breakdown. Newspapers reported that he was insane. After a break at home in Ohio, he returned to rear area service and started doing logistics for the up-and-coming Ulysses Grant. Sherman was technically a senior officer to Grant, but made clear he would support Grant's operations. "Command me in any way," he wrote to Grant. Returning to the field in early 1862 in the Army of West Tennessee, Sherman caught the brunt of a massive Confederate attack at Shiloh. To make matters worse, he had misread the intelligence warning him about the attack. Sherman did manage to rally his division and lead them through an orderly fighting retreat, preventing a rout. At the end of the day, in pouring rain, he came across the looming figure of Grant, made out by the glow of his cigar. Sherman hailed him, "Well, Grant, we've had the devil's own day, haven't we?" Grant replied, "Yes. Lick 'em tomorrow, though." Which has always struck me as the right way to approach adversity and a bad day at the office. Sherman led the counterattack the next day, was wounded twice, had 3 horses shot out from under him, and, as Grant had predicted, gave them a licking. It's viewed as the turning point in his life, and promotion to Major General didn't hurt either. The next month, Grant was in deep conflict with Halleck and thinking about resigning to get away from the whole mess. Sherman talked him into sticking with it, and 2 months later, Halleck left the theatre, giving Grant and Sherman the freedom to really start kicking ass. In November 1862, Grant was attacking the Confederate stronghold of Vicksburg on the Mississippi River, with Sherman commanding half his forces in charge of a corps. The battle did not start well, and Grant started formulating operations, leaving behind supply trains and feeding the troops by looting the countryside. Foraging being the polite word for something none of us would wish upon ourselves. A newspaper described the campaign saying, "The army was being ruined in mud turtle expeditions under the leadership of a drunkard whose confidential advisor was a lunatic." Grant being the drunkard and Sherman being the lunatic. But when they captured Vicksburg on 4 July 1863, the Confederacy was cut in two and denied access to the Mississippi River. It was at least as important a victory as the Battle of Gettysburg, occurring at the same time. In the following Jackson expedition, Sherman would successfully command an independent army. After eventual success at Chattanooga, Grant was called to Washington in the spring of 1864 to take command of the army. Sherman took command of the Western Theater of the war. He then launched his invasion of Georgia, with 3 armies making coordinated flanking maneuvers through rugged terrain, concluding in the capture of Atlanta on 2 September. After evacuating the civilian population, he ordered all military and government buildings burned, and if private homes were lost in the inferno, William Tecumseh Sherman did not care. He came to chew gum and kick ass, and he was all out of gum. The capture of Atlanta was crucial to the re-election of Lincoln. Had the Democrat McClellan won, which had been expected before the good news from Georgia, it's very likely a peace deal agreeable to the slavers would have been reached. On November 15, Sherman began the Great March to the Sea, leaving communications and supply lines behind, cutting a swathe through Georgia with 62,000 men, looting the plantations, tearing up the railways, and freeing the slaves, his army singing John Brown's Body as they marched. As an aside, the original tune John Brown's Body was considered a bit unrefined, full of soldiers' doggerel, and America to this day has not forgiven John Brown for being right about everything. But it did have a haunting line for soldiers to sing about lost comrades. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. His soul is marching on. And of course, Julia Ward Howe, who wrote the official words to the Battle Hymn of the Republic to the same tune, was married to one of the funders of the Harper's Ferry raid, just in case someone tries to tell you the Battle Hymn has nothing to do with Old Brown of Kansas. One notable unit in Sherman's March to the Sea was the 1st Alabama Cavalry Regiment, Union. The hill farms of northern Alabama were mostly slave-free, and those good honest folks knew the plantation owners did not have their best interests at heart. 2,086 of their sons enlisted for the Union, and Company 1 served as Sherman's personal escort in the March to the Sea. Their families would suffer terrible reprisals in the post-war years for their loyal service. They were particularly hated by the slave owners for having a knack for figuring out where the food and valuables were hidden on plantations. In December 1864, Sherman's forces reached Savannah, captured Fort McAllister, and made contact with the waiting US Navy. The damage inflicted in the march was estimated by Sherman to be $100 million, or more than $2 billion in today's money. His army then turned north into the Carolinas. Meanwhile, there were moves in Congress to replace Grant with Sherman, something he was vehemently opposed to. He declared, "General Grant is a great general. I know him well. He stood by me when I was crazy, and I stood by him when he was drunk. And now, sir, we stand by each other always." Sherman's advance through the swamps of South Carolina led his Confederate opponent Johnston to say, "There had been no such army in existence since the days of Julius Caesar." Capturing Columbia on 17 February 1865, it's disputed exactly how the state capital came to be burned down, but that sucker was most definitely burned to the ground. In late March, Sherman attended the City Point Conference in Virginia with Lincoln, Grant, and Rear Admiral Porter. This gave Sherman a direct insight into Lincoln's plans for the post-war settlement, which would get him in a lot of trouble, because on April 14, 5 days after the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox Courthouse, Lincoln would be shot dead, and the new President Andrew Johnson did not share Lincoln's views. Sherman offered the Confederates in the Carolinas generous terms on April 17, and Washington exploded. Secretary of War Edward Stanton leaked it to the New York Times with an insinuation that Sherman had taken a bribe, which would have been extremely galling, having marched an army all the way from Chattanooga to Durham via Atlanta, having done hard fighting all the way. On May 24, Sherman and some of his troops marched in the Grand Review of the Armies in Washington. Now, this has been a lengthy essay already, and Sherman's views on race and equality do have to be viewed through the lens of his time, which is to say some of Sherman's writings then would get him cancelled today. But we do have this comment by the African-American Baptist minister Garrison Frazier, who was asked by Stanton what he thought of Sherman, remembering Stanton hated Sherman's guts. His reply was, "We looked upon General Sherman prior to his arrival as a man in the providence of God, specially set apart to accomplish this work, and we unanimously feel inexpressible gratitude to him, looking upon him as a man that should be honoured for the faithful performance of his duty. Some of us called upon him immediately upon his arrival, and it is probable he would not meet the Secretary, that is to say Stanton, with more courtesy than he met us. His conduct and deportment towards us characterized him as a friend and a gentleman." Sherman also issued Special Orders No. 15 to strip land from plantation owners and give it to freed slaves. This was the basis of 40 acres and a mule, a resentment which continues to this day. The order was later revoked by President Johnson. In an essay shortly before his death in 1888, Sherman would write, "Let the Negro vote, and count his vote honestly. Otherwise, so sure as there is a God in heaven, you will have another war more cruel than the last, when the torch and dagger will take the place of muskets and well-ordered battalions." But his story didn't end with the war. In May 1865, Sherman would write, "I confess without shame I am sick of tired of fighting. Its glory is all moonshine. Even success, the most brilliant, is over dead and mangled bodies, with the anguish and lamentations of distant families appealing to me for sons, husbands, and fathers. 'Tis only those who have never heard a shot, never heard the shriek and groans of the wounded and lacerated, that cry aloud for more blood, more vengeance, more desolation." June 1865 saw Sherman commanding the military division of the Mississippi, the territory between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains. Incidentally, I want to thank my American elementary school teachers who made sure this Australian could spell Mississippi. This video would have been a mess without their attention to this detail nearly half a century ago. This sets the scene for the atrocities of the Indian Wars, that is Sherman's appointment, not my spelling of Mississippi. Sherman correctly viewed the expansion of the railroads as essential to securing the frontier, and the indigenous populations correctly viewed this expansion as an existential threat to their peoples. Sherman won at great cost to the original lords of the plains. Eradicating the bison herds to starve out the First Nations populations was particularly gruesome, but also particularly effective. In 1869, Grant became president, and Sherman was made a full general and commanding general of the United States Army. In this role, he would prosecute the Modoc War, the Great Sioux War of 1876, and the Nez Perce War. While he was undoubtedly committing genocide, he did speak out against the speculators profiting from the reservation system. In 1875, Sherman became one of the first Civil War generals to publish a memoir, but by no means was he the last. Supporters of Grant were outraged at his depiction, but Grant had this to say: "When I finished the book, I found I approved every word, that it was a true book, an honourable book, creditable to Sherman, just to his companions, to myself particularly so, just such a book as I would expect Sherman would write." The two old war horses were not going to let their toadies get between them. Columbus, Ohio, 1880, Sherman addressed a crowd of 10,000 people saying, "There is many a boy here today who looks on war as all glory, but boys, it is all hell." Over time, this saying has been contracted simply to "war is hell," but Sherman didn't say those three words that way. Also noteworthy, under Sherman's command of the Army was the establishment of the Command School, and now the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. Retiring at age 64 in 1884, he lived out his years in New York, dividing his time between theatre and amateur painting. When proposed as a presidential candidate in 1884, he famously declared, "I will not accept if nominated and will not serve if elected." Aged 71, he died of pneumonia on February 14, 1891. President Benjamin Harrison, who had served under Sherman, wrote to Congress, "He was an ideal soldier and shared to the fullest the esprit de corps of the Army, but he cherished the civil institutions organized under the Constitution and was only a soldier that these might be perpetuated in undiminished usefulness and honor." Joseph E. Johnston, the Confederate general who had opposed him through the South, was one of the pallbearers at the funeral. He was buried in St. Louis. In the 20th century, British military historians would describe Sherman as the first modern general, and Patton spent a long vacation touring the sites of Sherman's battles. And in terms of a legacy, let's not forget that the most important American tank of the Second World War was named after him. It's instructive to note that in the complex world of civilian life, Sherman struggled, truly coming into his own when he had a superior officer he could trust and an independent command. At which point he was able to wage a war that neither his opponents in the Confederacy nor his rivals in Washington could comprehend, but a war so total and so successful that it changed the course of history. Without the capture of Atlanta, it is likely a peace would have been reached and an emboldened Confederacy would have sought to expand chattel slavery throughout the world. And cruel as his campaign through Georgia and the Carolinas might have been to the plantation-owning slavers, and honestly, cry harder, you monsters, his campaigns brought the end of the war forward by years, with a huge reduction in the suffering of much more worthy objects of your sympathy. The Indian Wars are probably a greater stain on his memory, but they almost certainly would have occurred in much the same sad way without him. The best measure of Sherman's character is the absolute hatred poured on him by the scum of the earth, by the racists and slavery apologists of our own era. If you can measure a man by the character of those who hate him, well then Sherman is truly one of the greats.
And we're back. Now, one of the things that Brandon also sent us was a Monster energy drink in the Stars and Stripes, because America, yes, all right.
Red, white, and raspberry.
Ultra red, white, and blue raz, right? So we had that to really give us a spark. There's no alcohol in it, which I'm a bit disappointed with, but there is taurine and sugar. Oh, sorry, zero sugar. There you go. So we had that just to give us a real
A bit of lift.
That's right. So while the cage match is happening on the front lawns of the White House, we'll be, like Idiocracy, we'll be...
No, they did the cage match last week because they can't get their timings right.
But anyway, we'll be buzzing just like because it's got the electrolytes that plants crave. Anyway, getting back to the Sherman and the Battle of the Bulge.
So just quickly, I want to touch on the poll. We've now had 19 votes, which is quite a lot for us on the live stream. 95% say heck yeah, but then we have had a contrarian come in saying they could have done better.
I agree.
Yeah, they could have.
They could have done better.
But in terms of what they knew in 1941 when they were designing it to be a huge industrial throughput, I actually think they did a great job. Continue, Rob.
Right. During the Battle of the Bulge, the armoured advances and counterattacks took their toll on both sides, with many instances of Shermans bouncing rounds off Panthers, Panzer IVs and Stugs, when other times the Shermans were able to disable the Panzers and vice versa. And any encounter could go either way, especially in the close confines of the Ardennes forest and the crossroads and the villages and the bridges the month-long battle was fought over. So it really was a case of everybody says the Sherman, the guns on the Sherman weren't good enough to do such and such. They really were. It was just a case of when they were fighting at long distance and basically everybody was standing still and just lobbing rounds at 2 kilometres at a target they could see on the horizon, yes, the German tanks did better because the Sherman optics weren't as good and their rounds weren't as good at damaging German tanks at long range. But when they're actually on the advance and the counterattacks and so forth, at close range, they were fine, especially once they could manoeuvre around the side of any sort of German tank.
Which they could because they had more tanks, because they had more fuel and they had more spare parts, and the whole machine was doing its thing. And the machine was fueled by more resources than the Germans could have ever dreamed of, which is why the Germans were very stupid to have started the war in the first place.
Right.
Anyway.
Then we get into the from the Battle of the Bulge and Operation Bodenplatte, which was the last hurrah of the Panzers and the Luftwaffe.
Well, on the
Operation Bodenplatte base plate.
Yeah, but so on the western front, I mean, they didn't have many more hurrahs on the eastern front either. But
so that was in December, January 44, 45. This opened the way for the Allies to march into Germany with the Shermans leading the way. The US commanders still managed to sacrifice more men than they should have in places such as the Hürtgen forest north of Bastogne. Right, but basically it was a very effective tank. Whilst the challenge of the Panzers in Europe could be overcome by logistics, numbers, and close air support, the US Marines in the Pacific had a different challenge for their Shermans. Iwo Jima. The 22,000 Japanese troops had been tunnelling and preparing to defend the 5-mile-long island of Iwo Jima and its 2 airstrips in range of Tokyo for 18 months when the 70,000 Marines, supported by over 500 Navy ships and 150 Shermans, landed in February of 45. When the Marines landed, the Shermans could not get off the beach because of the terrain until the Seabees, which is the Marine engineers, built a path with their bulldozers under fire to basically clear the beach. And that didn't happen until day 2. Even then, the Shermans were limited in what they could do because of the harsh volcanic terrain, not to mention the fearless Japanese resistance. The Shermans were needed everywhere on the tiny island, as the Marines were advancing in 3 different directions at once, and there were just not enough to provide support for the troops as the narrow gully terrain and volcanic rocks hindered their movements and caused damage to the tracks of the Shermans. The most useful vehicle was the Zippo Sherman flamethrower tanks, which could spew fire out to 250 feet and had the fuel to clear many more bunkers than the man-portable versions of the flamethrower. But there were only 8 of them on the island. The famous image of the flag being raised on Mount Surabaya happened on day 6 after the landing, and it took another month to clear the island.
And for what it's worth, as a PR person, the photograph that everyone's seeing was taken a long time after it actually happened.
No, it happened on the same day. So what happened? So they took it. The Marines took up a small flag, put it up themselves, and no, there was no photo for it. But then there was a congressman or something, some sort of politician in with the crowd, and he said, go do that again. And so they took up a bigger flag with a bigger pole, and there was a war correspondent there who took the footage of the photo. And that was on day 6.
Okay. Okay.
And then there was another month of operations to actually try and clear the island after that.
When I say that, it's not a criticism. Every country recreated the scenes. Most of the iconic photographs of war you've ever seen were actually recreations days or weeks afterwards.
The politician said, "I want that flag," and the commander of the the lieutenant commander of the Marine Battalion said, "Hell no." That one went into the battalion stores, and he got the big one that was shown, that was done for the cameras, but the actual one that was done on the day was is held by the Marines. Now,
I just want to note, Armoured Austerities made it very funny, saying, yes, the flamethrower version, the one that General Sherman would be very proud of. Indeed.
Yeah.
Light them up.
So, of the 22,000 Japanese on Iwo Jima, only 1,100 were captured. Holdouts continued to come out of the tunnels and caves to attack the reserve occupation forces after the Marines had left. They basically put in reserve forces. And the last 2 Japanese soldiers on the island surrendered in January of 1949. Think about that, boys and girls. 4 years.
Well, they hide in the hills, and
there's no hills. There's just tunnels and caves, and there's just horrible. This tiny little 5-mile island. It's this horrible bloody terrain of volcanic ash and soil, and like nothing grows. There's no water, and it's just would have been miserable. Anyway.
Now, Rob, you need to drink some more beer, I'm going to do some of this. So, the Korean War. By the time of the Korean War, the Easy 8 was the mainstay of the US Army, noting, yes, we know. Anyway, mobility was okay up hills, but tracks and suspension did not fare well on Korean terrain, forcing the tanks to stick to roads. Also, the tracks and suspension could not stand up to the basic Soviet anti-tank mine. North Korea did not have any bazooka-type weapons, and Rob couldn't find anything on them using the RPG-1.
Which the Soviets had developed in 1944.
Yeah. So the 76mm gun was found inadequate for anti-personnel and anti-bunker work. The troops would have preferred the 75mm with HE or better yet the 90mm gun, as there was not a lot of tank-on-tank combat, only 119 contacts. Particularly once the Shermans got there, when the American light tanks and British Cromwells were
already dead,
done,
or captured.
The Sherman armour and 76mm gun was comparable to the T-34-85, with each able to penetrate the other vehicle's front armour at around 1,000 metres. However, the North Korean tanks rarely carried armour-piercing rounds. The T-34-76 with the ZIS-3 had to be very close to affect the Sherman from the front. North Korean tankers...
So the ZIS-3 was the 76? Yeah, 76, yeah. Sorry.
All right, take it from here, Rob.
All right, the North Korean tankers' aim was also called into question compared to their Soviet counterparts, because they didn't have as much training. It was noted the Shermans needed more machine guns. Who would have thought it, John? They needed more machine guns.
They needed more machine guns. They needed more enough. If only they had the double dacker of the...
they needed more.
The original M4s. The 30 cal was not... Yeah, Americans loved 30 cal at the start of the war, but it just was a useless intermediate round, in my opinion.
They wanted more machine guns when the human waves attacks were coming down the over the hills.
All right, next beer, Rob. Let's rack it up. What are we doing next?
I don't. Dealer's choice. What are those two?
All right, so we have the Mother Earth Brew Co. Kelly Creamin Vanilla Cream Ale. We'll see what this has to offer us. So Brandon's only sent one of each, which is fair enough. I think we appreciate.
We've got no dramas with that.
All the beers we get sent.
We're not sharing the glass, but we're sharing the can.
We're sharing the can, which will let us get through more beers. Yes.
Of course, we know which way the pours are going here.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's
right. That's why.
No, we're going to even this up. All right.
On camera.
There you go. All right, so a California cream ale, which
California Dreaming?
Yeah. Doesn't say a lot about what it is. So let's... And as someone who's worked in the brewing industry, I don't know a lot about what it is.
Love your mother. That's what it says on it. My goodness, that is very fruity.
It's got a lot of vanilla in it, which is not my favourite thing in a beer.
A milkshake, yes. Not not so much a beer.
So that's what we're dealing
Kind of
with
wish
here,
that
folks.
you'd stuck with the initial pour now.
All right. Well, we'll get through this and then we'll crack the next one. Yeah.
All right. So
Do you want to put the next one up here so we're ready to go there, Rob? Okay. Tasman's noting that the US tankers in Korea better trading gave them an edge. Yeah. Okay.
all right.
Continue.
All right. They needed more machine guns for the human wave attacks coming over the hills, as the M4s needed another machine gun that could be fired all around and not just the coax and the bow machine gun. The 50 cal was too exposed to be used, so the crews of the tanks would then weld a 30 cal tripod on top of the turret so the commander could fire without exposing themselves too much out of the cupola. Basically, they could be half out of the cupola and still throwing lead down range from a welded on 30 cal. All right. So this is where we get to the point where I say the legacy of the M4 and how I feel it was used, what it did, and so forth. All right. All my personal own opinions. So what is the legacy of the M4 medium, the Sherman tank? Was it the best tank of the war? No. Was it the greatest tank of the war? One of two, yes. Did it win the war for the Allies? By itself, no, but it was a huge part of the overall win based mainly on logistics, numbers, and being good enough for government work. Another aspect of the Sherman I really want to give it credit for is that if not for the Sherman, more of Europe would have ended up under Soviet influence. There was a world where the Soviets made it all the way across to Denmark and maybe the Netherlands and gained control of the Baltic and had easy access to the North Sea. But with the Sherman, with its reliability and strategic mobility, meant the Western Allies could race into Germany and get as far east as they did in strength, even if the finish lines were decided politically months before at Yalta. Because Stalin wasn't going to stop at the Elbe if the Shermans weren't there.
That's a fair point. I do think, though, Rob, that the good enough aspect needs to be understood and thought about. It would have been better if they hadn't stowed ammo in the sponsons. Ammo should not be on the outside of the vehicle in general unless it's in a blowout compartment. The aircraft engine it was designed around gave it a compromised shape, especially when you consider it was built in thousands with more compact engines. But standardization, raw numbers, copious fuel, and plentiful spare parts, helped enormously by the standardization, more than made up for these drawbacks in a major war. And remember that an M4 had to be built in one of 11 factories and then shipped anywhere in the world to fight, from the beaches of the South Pacific to the Russian steppes. And that's before we consider the soft factors of reduced crew fatigue, heated suits, and the gunner not having the commander's nutsack resting on his neck the entire time. Because when you look at how they were packed in British tanks, it was homoerotic as hell. Which is great if you're all into that. But
I was about to say, I'm sure the officers were, but...
The gunners less so, yeah. In general, crews could escape the tank when things went wrong, particularly after the wet-stowed ammo was introduced. But the disruption of major design changes was constantly weighed against any marginal benefits, and most of the time sticking to the tank they had was the right call.
All right. Plus, it had a long life, and every right-wing dictatorship the US wanted to prop up for the next 40 years that they couldn't sell more modern tanks to. So basically, anywhere they could throw tanks. But we'll get onto that one day. But the big question is, what does Girls on Panzer think of the Sherman?
Now, the Girls and Panzer fans have started to descend on us in the comments. And
have they?
They view you as uncultured for your lack of understanding of the deeper nuance, Rob.
I love it. I love anime. I mean, basically, yeah. Anyway, the quote from Girls and Panzer is, the tank is a true bestseller. They made 50,000 of this baby. This thing is sturdy and tough and surprisingly comfy, and it's so easy to steer, even a monkey could drive this tank using its foolproof manual. So there you go. Girls and Panzer has most types of Sherman shown in the anime and manga, including the M4A6, along with the M24 Chaffee was the only Girls and Panzer tank that was still in service when the anime started. And for some reason, they don't consider the Centurion as still being in service.
I think that's because they're wrong. But anyway.
But that's right. Their law is usually pretty good.
Yeah, they're heavily researched. They're just, no one's infallible, certainly not us. Now, Rob, let's get on to the beer for a moment.
All right.
We're currently tackling...
I really want to wash the taste of that vanilla out of my mouth.
Yeah. Look, it wasn't a bad beer. It just wasn't to our taste.
No,
but,
I much prefer another KBS or whatever it is.
Well, this isn't KBS, but this is
it's another Founders. It's
a Founders.
It's the same company.
It's the Founders Breakfast Stout, which is a double chocolate coffee oatmeal stout.
Delicious.
With roasted coffee, sweet and decadent, it says.
Now, if you rather than some red, white, and blue monster drink, I'd much rather a coffee stout.
Yeah, well, we're
we're
more downers than stimulants kind of folks.
It's got coffee right in it.
It's just, well, yeah, it's not a lot of coffee. But,
it's heavier than the KBS.
I think I preferred the KBS.
Yeah, it's a stronger flavour than the KBS, but I still like it.
It's a damn good stout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, if you want a chocolate coffee stout, there you go. It's not as smooth as the KBS, but the breakfast stout is pretty good. It'll wake you up. That's the point of a breakfast stout.
All right, get the next beer on the table, Rob.
Seriously?
This is your job. This is your life now. All right. Next one up, folks. Just be ready for it. We're doing the Schilling Hard Cider. I'm not quite sure why this podcast is doing a cider, but Brandon sent it, so we are drinking it.
Anyway, we also have to address the most famous Sherman tank movie ever made, which was called Tank, from 1984.
You don't think Kelly's Heroes is the most famous?
No, Tank from 1984, starring James Garner as a sergeant major who gets into trouble with the local corrupt sheriff and then needs to break his son out of lockup using his private M4A3 and then drive it through the woods to cross the state line, where he gets bogged down. The baddies had flooded this field so that the tank would get bogged down just short of the state border, and a bikie gang member jumps his motorcycle into the mud whilst carrying a tow rope under fire from the corrupt sheriff.
They're always corrupt.
So that the assembled onlookers, so once they hook the tow cable onto the Sherman, the assembled onlookers on one side of the border can then pull the Sherman across the state line and freedom. Have you ever thought a movie about a Sherman tank could be so dramatic and realistic, John? It's a great movie.
Amazing. And I would say that never ever assume the police won't pursue you over a state line. In the US, the Uniform Act on fresh pursuit is a thing in many to most places.
Whether or not it was happening in 1983 in the US, and remember, sheriffs, not police. Different things. But
it's in common law dating back to Magna Carta times that if law enforcement is in hot pursuit, they can pursue you and catch you, and it's part of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, and it's this model act in the US.
You go and watch the movie Tank with James Garner from 1984, and you will see the corrupt sheriff, the corrupt governor, and those people supporting them.
Yeah, I'm just saying, don't rely on it in your life that you can. There's a magical boundary that if you cross, they won't.
If I've got a Sherman tank that I want to
just turn the gun around and blast them away if you're doing that.
They did that too, but only through vehicles rather than people. All right.
It's time to refer to the poll. And we've had another vote for could have done better, but currently it's on 90% heck yeah. Now I need to advance something. So let's.
All right. So
there we go.
That was it on the Sherman. Right. That was it on the Sherman Part 1. Another day we'll
do the variants and the crabs and the calliopes
and the foreign versions and the after-war versions, the Super Shermans and everything else.
You didn't play nice by putting the flamethrower in there either, Rob.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I mentioned it once. Right? There was only 8 of them.
As we've noted, Sherman loves setting fire to stuff. So. And he should have set fire to more.
If somebody had called that earlier, maybe I would have done more with it. But anyway, I was concentrating on the US gun tanks.
Yeah. So just quickly want to thank our patrons. So in the Artificer tier, who get the interview early, or the feature video in this case, and ad-free video and audio of the show. We have Brian Jenkins, Pear, Cornelius Weber, Maxi Misk, Chicago John, Hans Vormhat, Johnny Oot, Monty, Jacob Caban, and Tom Kessler, and also our secret patron who doesn't want to be named.
Ooh.
Yes.
Well,
but we want him to know that we appreciate him, so I just thought I'd throw it out here this time.
Good work.
And in the Apprentice tier, who also get the ad-free audio and video of the show, we have David Mulvaney, Scotch12, Steve Matthews, Jamie Stokes, Guy Hook, Jay Beckman-Strauss, Hans Wang, Henry Hamid, Dan Sapienza, Christoph Keller, Tony L, Elliot Spicer, Russell Phillips, Red Rum X, Callum, Steve Broomfield, James Van Dyke, The Rain Man, Joe M, Mark Dorner, Jade, Colin Lang, Daniel Poon. Now, you might remember, Rob, when we had Benzie, short for Mercedes, gave us a comment like a year ago saying, I want everyone to wish my dad happy birthday.
Right,
That's his daughter. That's the guy.
Who, Daniel Poon?
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday, Daniel Poon,
for back then.
And for whenever it's happening this year. Look, men of our age should celebrate our birthdays. I make sure. I haven't worked on my birthday for the last 25 years. It all stemmed about from reading a book about Southwest Scott and young Captain Oates. When he said, I'm going out for a walk, I may be some time. Yeah. That was his birthday, boys and girls.
Oh.
That was his birthday. 39 years old, Captain Oates walked out into the snow, never came back. I said after that, you know what? Bugger it. I'm never working on my birthday again. And I haven't since then.
That is quite a hill to die on, Rob. But
damn straight it is.
Let's move on. We've got a couple more patrons to thank. Rasmus and Master Colossus. Okay, in terms of patrons and Apple bastardry, so it's always keep calm, carry on, but do not use your iPhone to join up on Patreon because Apple will take 30%. If you use a web browser, then Patreon takes their cut, but we get more of your money. And we're figuring if you're doing it, it's
fight the power.
You'd like us to see some of it. Yeah, if you're so inclined. And also do check out totallytank.net. Because that's where we keep updating people on important stuff.
Now, you put that one out, but we've got to go. Are any of these considered the review beer?
Okay, so Rob, give us the review beer, and I'm gonna chuck us back onto the Sherman stuff while we sort this out. So Rob has been to Aldi and gotten some Coors
because Aldi is selling 6 packs of Coors because it's the 4th of July and they know that when these sort of things happen, so in Cinco de Mayo, they sell Corona. In, I don't know what other days and they bring out, but I think they had the tenants for
Look,
some sort of Scottish day.
When I was looking around for Budweiser in Dan Murphy's, which is where 30% of all beers in Australia are purchased from.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. Anyway, there was a lot of Coors. Yeah.
There you go. Well, lower carb. I didn't mean to get. I mean, it's not even says it's Coors Light. It says it's lower carb. Now, it's got a mountain on it. I'm not sure.
The whole point of beer is that it's carbs and alcohol. That's what it's designed for.
4.2%. It is a 355ml can. 1.2 standard drinks in the can, but I mean, the mountain. Do you recognize the mountain out at all? Lager filter.
That's somewhere from Colorado, right?
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure Coors is a Colorado beer, but
made in Australia.
This is made in Australia. Oh, that's very disappointing. So somewhere in Bankstown, they're doing a Colorado recipe.
There you go.
Fantastic.
But as you said with your Budweiser, it's probably just mass-produced beer, lager, and let's see how it goes.
It's okay, but it's... I really feel we should have split one of them between us and got on to more of the other beers, but here we are. We're doing this. So, all right, Rob, what's happening?
All right. So Kira's is gone. Long live the guy who just won Makerfield. So I mean, for those who don't know,
the Makerfield by-election. So 50,000 British people chose to install the next British Prime Minister.
And it's a Keir's buddy, like the British Prime Minister's, this guy got elected, so I guess I got to quit now.
Well, he had to because everyone in his party hated him. And
everybody bloody hated him.
Everyone in the country hated him. And I will say about Keir Starmer, while we're here, while we're doing this, Sir Keir, he had a spectacular ability to just target everyone.
I mean, he won with such an overwhelming majority. He could have said, right, we're going to tax the rich and get rid of all the oligarchs, the Russian oligarchs out of central London.
No, he didn't want to do that. And instead we've got like persecution of political activists that hasn't been seen since the English Civil War. It's insane. And just his ability to pick on people with fuel, heating fuel rebates.
Just remember, it's not happening now because it's a fucking heat wave in the UK. But come winter time, they've cut the rebate for pensioners to be able to heat their houses. So grandma and granddad are all going to die freezing in their house.
But so he just kept picking on people that he didn't need to pick on for any particular reason. Nothing for him. In my own particular case, I am a dual citizen of Australia and the United Kingdom. And he suddenly brought in this rule that I can't enter the UK without a UK passport, which I probably don't have the documentation to gain anymore. And it's just like, well, why would you do that? The only reason I'm not allowed to enter the UK on my Australian passport is because I am actually a citizen of the United Kingdom. And it's just like, this is mean and weird, and why would you do that?
Should have picked the winning side, being Australia, baby. Stick with Australia. I could have also gotten one of them as well.
Yeah, you could have, but
I said, no way, I'm Australian through and through.
It's nutty, but in my own particular case, I don't expect anyone to cry any tears for me.
I'll laugh though.
It's fine. But it's like the only reason I'm not allowed to enter the United Kingdom is because I am actually a citizen of the United Kingdom. That is a very perverse and weird reason to be excluded from entering your country.
Let's face it, their passports are still probably cheaper than ours though. But your process of actually getting the dual citizenship activities sorted out is probably more expensive than...
Well, there used to be a passport office in Canberra that I could go to and talk to them about my issues, but they've shut that down and
Yeah. You can't fix anything.
Yeah. Anyway, my bigger point was that Keir Starmer is such a bastard. And it wasn't just me, it was all these other people who were like, what? Why the hell are you fucking with me? Anyway, the bigger point is that he can't fix anything unless you're willing to tax the wealthy instead of screwing the poorest in society. And in the words attributed to the bank robber Willie Sutton, why do you rob the banks? Because that's where the money is. The poorest people in society cannot be expected to pay what is needed to make modern societies work.
You need to change the screens.
It's time to go on to the next one. All right.
But anyway, there was a by-election. There was a guy in a place called Makersfield.
Andy Burnham, the mayor of Greater Manchester.
But it's
the king of the north.
It's a tiny little town out. It's not that far north. Manchester is not that far north. It's not like York or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's nowhere near the Scottish border. Anyway, it's this tiny little town outside of Manchester, and he got elected as the MP there, and he is now the heir apparent to the British Prime Ministership. And who knows what he'll do? He'll probably take us into a war if Keir is the only way things are going.
All right. Anyway, getting into the second half of the show, Rob, the Tank Museum is very cross with us.
I didn't think that. I think you've been a little bit mean to myself.
So some uncultured hooligans on the internet have been calling a British tank cat food.
I don't know who would do it. We would never do that. They would never.
No, we did that about the Cromwell.
Yeah. I can't remember. I was drunk.
So anyway, the point was that they made a compelling argument that the Cromwell was actually great.
I'm sure I said that.
But they did it by carefully cutting out at least half of the story. And they also completely undercut previous videos by their own David Fletcher, and making some very curious arguments that sloped armor was too hard because the whole machine gun needed a vertical surface.
The Beezer.
But even we've just done a whole episode on the Sherman with its sloped glasses. And
47 to 56 degrees of arm.
Which they could mount machine guns in, but somehow only the Cromwell required front vertical armour.
No, the Matilda and the Churchill and all the other British tanks had to have a...
Yeah, but I'm just saying it was possible to mount a machine gun without a vertical surface.
Not for the British.
Well, not for the British, but that's...
I mean, even the Firefly, they took that whole machine gun out. Yeah. Remember that? So even the Firefly, the Sherman that actually came with one, they had to take it out so they could...
Yeah. Anyway, I think, and Rob thinks I've been a little too mean on Chinless Dude, but Rob thinks
I'm much nicer.
Yeah, Rob's nicer, and we're kind of hoping that Bovington will one day invite us to do a top 5 tank.
I think he's just looking for the clickbait of outrage.
Yeah, he gives the outrage. Anyway, the justifications on Cromwell were ludicrous if you take in the broad spectrum of what was wrong with that tank, which we covered in our Cromwell episode, which people should check out.
Yeah. Tasman's saying that the Matilda didn't have a bow gun. You're right, but it did have flat-faced armour. Anyway, maybe. I don't know. I could be totally wrong.
It was quite curvy, really. We should say it really feels like succeeding on YouTube is about telling people what they want to hear, and Bovington is chasing the clicks right now.
All right. Now, close to my green-leaning heart is the fight against climate change. France has had a week of 40 degrees heat at the moment, so they have banned alcohol. We cannot let this stand and must stop climate change, because if there is one thing we want to make sure of is that we have the freedom and the audacity to drink in any sort of heat that we feel like. Right? Right now it is cold outside. Even though the sun is shining, it is cold outside, and we are still drinking happily. Actually, the sun's probably gone down by now, but we are in a basement a long way away from the sun. But it's cold outside, and we are drinking. And in France, people are unable to drink because it is too hot outside.
Well, it's a government mandate. But my friend Dan is in France right now. Shout out, Dan, if you're listening. And he's sending back horror stories of bars with unchilled beer fonts being unable to pour draft beer, which is the ultimate nightmare, Rob.
We need to fight climate change, boys and girls. This is what it means, right? When they said... I won't even go into that. But anyway, all right, we'll go into the next thing, which is pronoun-choosing Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, said that the US military was too soft to get needles without a lollipop. And now they've all got the sniffles. And for those that want to celebrate America's exceptionalism of 250 years, well, for those 249 of those years, the US military has had mandatory vaccines, as Washington in 1777 said, yeah, you know what, you're getting smallpox vaccines, you lot, all of you, you're getting it, right? And for those that don't know, John, why don't you tell us about being hoist by your own petard means in relation to the medical freedom movement?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Rob. Basically, the thing with vaccines is that you are asked to have a small personal benefit, as in you won't get the horrible disease, significant personal benefit, frankly, with a small risk that you might have an adverse reaction to it. But you also have an enormous societal benefit that no one else, including the people who have medical reasons why they can't have the vaccine, are getting a herd immunity that is provided by you doing the right thing and just getting the damn jab. The only people who are opposed to vaccines are complete assholes who are unwilling to take on any personal risk for the benefit of broader society, and also too stupid to realize that 99.9 times out of 1,000 they are also getting a personal benefit. So it's insane, Rob.
And especially when you're in the military and you've signed up to say, I'm going to do what these people tell me, whatever to my body, whatever that happens. It's not a case of you're in the military. You don't get to say, oh, but I don't feel like it today because I have these views about needles and I have these views about medical science, because I'm in the military. You don't get that choice, boys and girls, right? 249 years of that, you don't get that choice. But Pete said you do. And now they've all got the sniffles.
Yeah, no, they've all got diseases because they're meant to take the vaccine so they don't get diseases. It's not that bloody hard.
I remember when I joined up, I had my little needle book from the US, where I got had all the little yellow book saying these are all the shots I'd gotten before I was even allowed to go to the US elementary schools. I'm sure you did too.
Yeah.
And I brought that back with me in Australia. And when I signed up to the army, I took that along with me and said, these are all the shots I've already had. Because the US has a lot more than Australia.
Before we advance, what do you think of the cause? I cannot distinguish it from the Budweiser, to be honest.
No, neither can I. But it's an easy drinkable lager, I've got to say. Mm-hmm. It's much nicer than that vanilla thing.
Yeah, the vanilla thing had some problems, but the vanilla thing there was no issue with the way it was made. It was just not a taste to my liking.
No. Yeah. Anyway, the Royal Navy, they've decided to. They're no longer going to build destroyers.
It's an epochal announcement because destroyers were the biggest combat units they were making, and
it's not that they could make an aircraft carrier or a submarine.
Well, they've made 2 aircraft carriers recently, and they're trying to build submarines in Maggie's farm, but it's they have made.
We're having a bit of fun now, boys and girls, because we are anyway. But because it's the 4th of July and we're celebrating.
Yeah, so the decision is that they're going to scrap destroyers to build drone command ships, which Rob has said is what you get for having a Marine as First Sea Lord, which is probably right.
He doesn't value the ship. He doesn't value the hull. He doesn't value the tradition of the UK being a naval power.
But we do still have... Oh, hang on. History of Everything's just chimed in saying, hot take here, the new frigates being built are blurring so hard between roles that this announcement is kind of
Yeah, well, Chris, you might be right. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I also want to say that Malcolm Turnbull, our former Prime Minister, and he says that...
Sorry, can I wave my dick around here?
Go for it.
So, I have actually had dinner with Malcolm Turnbull and his wife Lucy, and when I say had dinner, I'm not talking about there were 3,000 of us in the room. It was a table of 4. It was me, Lucy, Malcolm, and Chaz Licciardello of Chaser fame. So I spent like 2 hours in deep conversation with former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. And certain people who've blown us off, it's just like, no, we've actually talked to people who are serious.
All right. Yeah. Look, he said, I'm sure they'll be able to build the AUKUS subs for Australia, even though they're not building their own destroyers. So, as I said, Malcolm Turnbull has suggested that the British Navy could partner with the French to build nuclear subs, as the French have 6 of their new nuclear submarines on the way. Plus, it would be the only way Australia could get any subs from the French after we cut them out of the deal and really piss them off.
You know what? One thing I love about the French is if we pay them the money, they will deliver the subs. Whereas with the US, we pay them the money and they do not deliver the subs. So,
as he made the point in the conversation of 3 leaders turned up for this negotiation and discussion, and only one of them was bringing money. And who was bringing money? Australia was bringing the money, right? We paid billions of dollars to the US. We're not going to get any subs from them. We paid billions of dollars to the UK. We're not going to get any money from them. But that's AUKUS 1. AUKUS 2, which is the second part of the agreement.
Second tranche.
Which is where we do all the technology exchange. Basically, that's where all the real stuff happens that doesn't actually require subs and ships and whatever else. It's basically you're saying, yeah, you've got AI technology to allow you to blow shit up from a long way away, and we're going to pass that between Australia, the UK, and the US. Whoever builds it. So that's tranche 2 is probably worthwhile, but the rest of it, yeah, no. Anyway, John,
So, Task and Purpose have done a really good video in the last couple of weeks on the six, depending how you count them, different European tank programs, and all of them pretty much feature Rheinmetall, and none of them are the MGCS, the Main Ground Combat System, which I still love that we had so much engagement back in 2019 when we started this podcast. Pretty much the only engagement we had was Europeans being like, oh, you got to be talking about MGCS. This is the future of tanks. Anyway, there's been this hilarious matrix of different tank programs that most of them have Rheinmetall somewhere in them, but all of them are something different. None of them are going to be a tank that anyone builds in any numbers. It's a colossal cock up, and I hope the Rheinmetall shareholders laugh all the way to the bank, and I hope my pension fund is one of those shareholders. Yeah.
All right.
Also moving on, Chris Cappy, who used to be Task and Purpose but is not anymore. He's done a video on the US plan to surge 900,000.
Is that a right number? Because I'm not sure they actually have that many soldiers.
It's insane. 900,000 US soldiers to defend Taiwan as long as they get 3 months warning. And on top of that, as long as CENTCOM haven't blown away all the long-range missiles and operating hours on the fleet. It's absolutely nuts. You're not going to get 3 hours warning. The Battle of Taiwan is going to be fought over about 48 hours tops, and is going to involve long-range missiles smashing the US fleets in Yokohama and Guam, and
which is why they've been rebuilding the airstrips and all the other islands in the in the Pacific around that area. Yeah. Anyway, so you mean the ammo that the US is going to store in Australia, right? Because that's what the US is now planning to do. So they've moved. The US is going to build up war stores in Australia. I'm getting there, all right?
Oh, sorry, Rob.
All right. Anyway, basically, they've said, look, if there's any conflict in the area, we want to make sure we have ammunition and basically war stores available. And so, can we put those in Australia, please? And so, right now, they're moving them in, and we've asked, well, can we charge rent?
There's a huge problem going on right now that the Americans are getting very shitty that Australia has biosecurity protocols. So things that they want to bring into the country, we're like, have you sprayed that for fungal contaminants? And they're like, no, we don't care. Just let us do what we want to do. And there's
I think it's because they really are annoyed with the Brits because they've given up the sovereignty of the Chagos
Islands, which is Diego Garcia is part of. Yeah. That's a part of it, but there's also this huge issue that in Darwin, the US military has built colossal petroleum storage facilities that are not cyclone rated, and Darwin is a cyclone
hugely
place, and
it's one of the most lightning struck places in the world.
Yeah, it's like. We have rules about what you can build here for a very good reason, and you dickheads are blowing it all up.
Even the power poles in Darwin are much bigger and stronger than anywhere else because they've got to be rated to survive a cyclone. Anyway, so they want to store war stores, not war boys or witness me. What a beautiful. They'll be stored down in Bandiana, which is another place I worked rather than.
I was going to say, you are a Bandiana expert at levels that very few other human beings are.
And I'm going to guess that they're going to store them in East. So all these thousands of weapons and ammunition, they're going to stand. They might store them in East Bandiana, which is the logistics hub, and which is where they refurbish all the. Tanks and armoured vehicles. But there's also a lot of room at Latchford Barracks, which I just found out the other day is being sold off as part of the Australian military's selling off of land that is worth a lot of money, and they want to get cash in for. There's also North and South Bandiana. North has a lot of warehouses that just are empty. But I always think to myself, are they setting up for a Red Dawn scenario, or Tomorrow When the War Began, which is a book series about the Australian version of Red Dawn? But we don't. But then again, we don't actually permit foreign military bases on Australian soil. And I guess Pine Gap, Weeper, Robertson Barracks, and soon to be HMS Sterling are fine because the US are there in cooperation.
Nah.
Not to mention the semi-permanent training presence of the Singaporean military in Queensland.
Which we never like to talk about. Yeah.
And because it brings in a lot of money, but nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah. So in other exciting news, Donald Trump has said that communism is the biggest threat facing America on the eve of their 250th birthday. And I would argue that accelerating accumulation of wealth in the hands of a small coterie of thieves and rapists isn't the problem. It's anyone who thinks the wealthiest might have to pay their share of the cost of running a modern society. Anyway, let's move past that. Rob, we're drinking this cider.
Now drinking cider. And how's our poll going, John? We're still at 21 votes.
The poll has moved on to 21 votes.
We are finishing up, folks. So if
Sherman tanks, heck yeah, and could have done better, 10%. So in general, most tank aficionados are like Sherman tanks, heck yeah.
It was a good tank. It achieved a lot of things. As I said, the strategic logistics and mobility and good enough for government work. And it did have a far lower rate of casualties compared to most of the US body forces deployed in Europe. It was really good for that regard.
Yeah, I mean,
it could take out any German tank if done right. If it wasn't done right, it couldn't. But I mean, there was plenty. When I was reading about it, there was so many instances of case of, they drove into the town and there was a Panzer or a Panther there, and they bounced off the front of it. And there was other situations where the case of they drove into town and they put 2 rounds into the Panther and it was gone. It was a case of, it was realistically, it was a case of what was going on the day and where you go from there. To my mind, it was a good tank.
So, Chris from history, everything is said. The big question, have you had enough beers yet for the Wallabies? I'm on my 7th.
I think we're beyond the 7th, but will the Wallabies beat the Irish tonight?
Probably not.
Probably not. But anyway. It is in Australia, so I think we've got a good chance.
So I just want to finish up saying anyone who is coming to Oz Armour Fest 26, you probably already bought your tickets and booked your flights, but now is the time to get your T-shirt or hat, so you can hang out with us cool dudes at the pub. There'll be money on the bar. So come join us. Get it on redbubble.com.
Yeah, there'll be money on the bar, boys and girls. So come drink with us. Because you know what? We like hanging out with people. We've got some money and we're going to put it on the bar and drink and enjoy the after effects of a day of riding, smelling and watching tanks.
And Chris is going to be there too. So, you know.
Even better.
We're going to have a good time.
Right. Thanks very much, all. And we'll see you next month.